still starting. Oh, what's up, going on, guys? We're here. We're live. My name's Joey. I'm AK Chicago. Joey, welcome to Poker Life podcast. Before we get into it, guys, Thursday, we're going to have Phil Galfond on the podcast, 7 p.m. Eastern, to talk about his announcements for Run It Once Poker that he just put out about the no HUDs, anonymous poker, and all that type of stuff. It's going to be 7 p.m. Thursday. And my coach says I really need to start talking more about my the Upswing affiliate thing I have. So guys, Upswing Poker, check it out. If you guys want to be the 5% of people who watch my stuff that are losing players, that want to be winning players, go check out Upswing Poker, even though I know a lot of you guys are winning because we do have a primarily winning player audience around here. Unlike my buddy Doug Polks, whose all audience is mostly losing players, here, winning players. Shout out to you guys out there. But if you want to win, go check out Upswing Poker. And that's it, man. Joining me on the podcast today is a young woman who I was trying to write a description about, and I feel like I was writing 35 sentences. I was trying to figure out what's like a good description of her to put in the YouTube title or on Twitter. I'm like, man, I don't know. She does a lot of things. She does all kind of things. She's a New York Times best-selling author. I think so. I think she's a psychologist expert. I don't know if she's going to use the word expert. I think she's like a wizard psychologist expert. She went to a couple different Ivy League schools out there. She started playing poker, working with Eric Seidel for a new book. And then it turns out she just started crushing poker. She started running it up, started traveling the world. She decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to put off a little bit on the book. I just read a little bit more about that on Deadspin and kind of a lot of these different sites out there have been picking up on it. She's given a lot of talks. TED Talk out there too. I saw her on a well, I can't remember the name of the talk show talking about, is Donald Trump a con man? I'm curious about that myself too. And I don't know, all kind of stuff. I feel like I could keep going on the intro. There's a lot of different things in there, but we're joined by Maria Konnikova. What's up, Maria? Welcome. Did I miss something there? I feel like I missed a couple.
Nah. You didn't miss anything. Thanks for having me, Joey.
So what would be, I'm serious. I'm like, what would be the description you have of yourself? Because if someone like a friend said, who you have on the podcast, I go, well, let me tell you, let me tell you about her. So what would be your sort of way you'd say, like, how would you describe yourself?
Well, normally I'd just say I'm a writer. And these days I will say that I'm a writer moonlighting as a poker player.
A writer moonlighting as a poker player. I kind of like that. Sova Perdita said, I read her first book back in the day, Mastermind, How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes, one of my favorite books ever. Yes, that is one.
Thank you.
That is one of the books you did write. Also, you wrote a book called The Confidence Game, which I have checked out a little bit of, and it's also been recommended to me by a couple of my friends. I think Fader Holes, the young prince on the podcast, talked about how he enjoyed that book too. So you have a couple of those books out there. And yeah, how did you decide to do more author stuff than more psychological sort of professional work like that?
Yeah, well, that's what I studied in undergrad. I studied writing, and I always wanted to be a writer, but I'm fascinated by the human mind, and I wanted to learn more about how it works. So I decided to go to grad school and to study psychology, not because I ever wanted to go into academia or practice psychology or anything like that, but just because I was interested in it. And grad school is this little known fact about grad school. It's a wonderful way to have time to write and not to have a day job, because you actually get a small stipend. It's not a lot of money in New York. It's basically no money, but at least like you're getting something, and you have a lot of freedom. And I got very lucky. I had an advisor who knew exactly what I was doing, and was really cool about it. I was his last ever grad student. He's in his 80s, and he's like, you know what, do your thing. Let's do some psychology and then go write. So I started working on my first book when I was in grad school. That was always the plan. But I'm really glad I got the PhD because psychology is really cool.
So you just decided, so I read that you went to Harvard there and then you decided, I'm going to get my PhD for fun yeah. At Columbia. So was it like actually like that for fun? I'm going to get my PhD.
Yeah, well, it wasn't just for fun. It was more strategic, to be perfectly honest, because I was working in media before then. And it was really just draining me completely. I mean, I had my first year out of college, I had 5 different jobs. I did it all. I worked as a copywriter for an ad agency. I was a full-time bartender trying to write on the side. Basically, you know, I worked for a new media publication. It was a newsletter for guys. I was their first female hire. You know, I did a lot of different things. And then I worked in television for 2 years. And it was really fun and really cool, but it took a lot out of me and I couldn't really work on my own writing. And I've always loved psychology. So I actually was deciding, you know, do I go for an MFA, a Master in Fine Arts, and study writing more, but you have to pay for that and it's actually really expensive? Or do I go to grad school so that they pay me? And so strategically, I said, you know what? This is really interesting. I'll have a chance to learn from really intelligent people who are a lot smarter than I am. And it'll be a chance to kind of stretch my brain and take on a new challenge and also have time to write. So that was kind of my thinking.
And then, it's interesting you mentioned that, learn from people that are smarter than you, and kind of reading from how you decided to get started with the book. You reached out to Eric Seidel. Was Eric Seidel one of the first people you reached out to when you were researching the idea of the new book? And he's like, sure, come be my apprentice. Well, how did that sort of thing work? What happened with getting in touch with Eric Seidel for your new book?
Yeah, he was the first person I reached out to. So I actually knew nothing about poker at all and didn't really know any of the names or anything like that. So I just started doing some research and I was like, okay, who are the guys who've been around for a long time? And Eric really stands out because he's been winning since the 80s. Like that does not happen very often. Like he still plays at the highest stakes and he's still winning. And he also, like, I watched some videos and he seemed like a nice guy, to be perfectly honest. I was like, okay, let me reach out to him just completely cold. It's not like I had an introduction or anything like that. I actually reached out to him on Twitter. Twitter can be very fun that way. And he happened to be in New York. And so we met for breakfast and I kind of told him, hey, I'm a writer. I write for the New Yorker. I'm thinking of doing this book. I know nothing about poker. Do you want to be a part of it? Do you want to actually teach me, basically train me in poker and see if I can do it? And he thought that it would be a really interesting idea. He thought my background could be potentially good for poker. He did warn me. He's like, you know what? I have no idea if you're going to be good. So like, let's see, because maybe you're going to just absolutely suck at poker. So he was very kind of straightforward and honest about that, which I really liked. And he said, let's just give it a try, like trial run, see if we get along, see if you and poker get along. And it worked out really well.
It did work out. This was very recently, right? When did this actually start happening?
This was a little over a year ago. Yeah, so it was incredibly recent.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, I know a lot of people have been playing poker for a pretty long time, and I doubt they approached learning and approached working at it quite as hard as I am imagining that you're approaching working at it. But man, I mean, these people have been trying for years. I even know professional poker players that have been trying without a lot of success. Whether we can debate how professional they are or not, but yeah, it seems like from there you started playing. I think I read you started playing in the Golden Nugget. I actually took my dad to that Golden Nugget $40 tournament, and we had a good time. We both played a final table. Shout out to me and my dad. Awesome. And we both did not take it down. Unfortunately, we could have used. These guys are good. They're good players. But then you sort of went from there. You had a pretty big score early on, and then you just had this thing. Yeah. You've been playing consistently, cashing almost every single month since this started. At the World Series last year, in different countries around the world, you had a first place in PCA. You had I think a second place out in Asia. I mean, you're like Mrs. Worldwide right now, going all over.
Well, Eric was actually really good about making sure. He's like, you know what, if you want to be a professional poker player, let's really do it right. You're going to build up your bankroll. Like, I'm not going to let you play anything you can't play. So I remember coming to Vegas, and it was really basically my first time in Vegas. I'd been there once before for a wedding, but that didn't really count. And he drove me to the Golden Nugget. So I'm a true New Yorker. I don't know how to drive. So he drove me to the Nugget and left me there. He's like, all right, you have to play in their daily tournament. And then we did the same thing kind of in all of those small, they're not actually small, but in all of those like off-strip casinos to kind of try to get me to figure out what the hell I was doing. And at first I really didn't know what I was doing at all. But then when I started consistently doing well, I won my first tournament at Planet Hollywood, their daily tournament. And then he's like, okay, now that's your bankroll. Now let's move you up to the Aria dailies and see how you do there. And until you start final tabling those, you can't do anything else. So he was really good to kind of make sure that I managed it well. And I studied my ass off. Like, I have not worked this hard at anything since I became a writer and was working at becoming a professional writer. Like, I work every single day when I'm not playing. I'm studying. I never thought I would do this in a million years, but I bought a new computer so that I could actually buy PO Solver and run it because I have a Mac. Because I'm in media, and so I've never had a PC, so I had to buy a PC so that I could buy that. I actually signed up for Upswing and took the Heads Up class. I did that actually after I came in second in a tournament in Dublin and was really and realized that I really needed to work on my heads up game and my final table kind of shorthanded game, because I felt really out of my league and felt really uncomfortable. And actually after that, so I spent 2 months exclusively working on heads up and shorthanded play, and then went on to win PCA, the PCA National. After that, that was my first tournament after I had done that immersive study. So it was really useful. It was a very good investment, best $1,000 ever.
Shout out to my boy Doug Polk's Heads Up course on Upswing Poker. You can get that at a link below if you want to learn how to win more. Listen, I'm inspired today. I see how good Maria is with herself, getting out there. Very well-spoken woman on a lot of these videos. I say, maybe I need to step it up a little bit here. I don't know. I feel like we're having the wizard on here right now. So okay, so you're studying, you're putting in all this work. Yeah. So for you, what does that studying start off as? So when you're first learning the fundamentals and sort of this introduction theory, what did that entail for you?
So I'm insanely lucky that I was able very early on. So when I came out to Vegas, I didn't play right away. Instead, I was actually allowed by all of the players in the area. Sorry, I'm in New York. You're going to hear some sirens.
We need this in our life right now.
Yeah. So I was very lucky in that. So the ARIA hosts these monthly high roller tournaments. Back then they weren't monthly, but I came during a time where they had some 25 and 50Ks, and there aren't that many guys who play in them. Normally the field's pretty small. But the tournament director, Paul Campbell, he was very nice, and he said, okay, if all the players allow you to sweat with Eric and to actually sit behind him, then it's cool by me. And so I actually asked every single player. So like I'd go up to them and be like, hey, will you let me, sit behind Eric? Hi, Jason Kuhn. Like, will you let me sit behind? And they all said yes. So I was actually allowed very early on to watch these and actually see how they're playing. And the guys were so incredibly nice and actually inviting. And then after that, Jason was like, do you want to sweat with me for a bit? I play really differently from Eric. And I was like, yes, please. So I had a chance to really kind of look at how these guys play and learn from that. And they were all super cool about saying, if you ever want to talk through hands or review anything, hit us up. And I did that. And so that's actually really kind of my main way of studying, other than doing things like, running sims or taking the Upswing class. The Run It Once videos I know you're having Phil on are incredible. They've been ridiculously useful, and Phil's been really great about helping me as well. So, but reviewing hands and actually talking through them has been, I think, the way that I've learned the fastest. And it's funny, if you were to ask Eric, he'd say, the first hands I brought to him, he's like, oh my God, what are you even doing? Like, how are you in this spot? How is this a question? Like, you should not be, like, this spot should never happen. Like, you don't have a question about this spot, you fold pre-flop. I was like, okay, I've got a few things to figure out. And he was also very strict about how I told him the hands. Because I'd admit a lot of information, because it was really hard for me at the beginning, to keep track of everything. He was like, well, how deep stacked are you? I was like, well, I have this many blinds. He's like, okay, what about, the other guy? I was like, I don't know. I don't remember. Like, so it was very useful, because then I learned what I'm supposed to pay attention to, the things I'm supposed to be noting. And I got to the point where it was much less stressful. And now I'm able to kind of jot down hands very quickly when I play, which I actually do. So I actually write down a lot of hands when I'm playing, even live. I have a little notebook and I'll write them down, and then we'll review them. And then I'll, do some PO solver stuff and talk.
What does that mean? PO solver. What's that?
It's this horrifying piece of software.
No, I meant, what's the look you gave? I say like PO. I mean, I'm not. I mainly play the great game of Potluck Omaha, which I'm sure we'll get into. See if you play the great game of Potluck Omaha too. But for most people, they say it with pride. They're like, I'm in PO. I'm in PO 75 hours a day. But you say it like I'm in PO. So you look like you don't like PO solver.
I don't. I mean, I like that it exists. And I realized, pretty early on. At first, I was like, I'm a writer. My strength is psychology. It's people. It's like, it's reading people. And I still think that's true, because I do observe people really closely, and I do have a lot of experience. And I am very good at kind of just reading table dynamics and reading people. And at the beginning, I was like, I don't really need any of that math crap, because I've never done math in my life. Like, that's not my background. And then, like, pretty early on, like, as I started getting better and learning more, I was like, shit, I need the math crap. Like I really need the math crap. So for me, it's always been like, okay, I have to do it. So it's been a struggle. I've gotten much better at mental math. I used to not be able to do it at all. Because the last time I did mental math was probably in high school. And even then you had your calculator. So, I'm one of those people who like holds up my fingers and it's like 1, 2, 3, let's do the counting. Then I realized that you really do need to know that, and you can't play well and you can't play at a higher level without that. And then I was like, shit, I think I need the solver shit too, because I didn't think I needed that. And then I was like, well, these guys are doing all these different bet sizings and they're really playing better. Because one of the things that I do a lot is watch high roller streams with Cards Up coverage. So like you can watch the Super High Roller Bowl and watch the best players in the world and take notes and see what they're doing. And I was like, okay, to understand this, I actually need to do it myself and really understand it. So that's why I said it with that kind of look, because to me, it was not like, yes, PO solver. It was like, fuck PO solver. But it's been incredibly helpful. I'm really glad I have it. I think that it was money well spent. It's time well spent. I have to force myself to do it, but I'm really glad that I do, because I think I understand a lot of the theory much better now. There's something about doing it yourself and actually kind of working through it. Because I lack the experience, I think for a lot of people who say they're kind of feel players, they actually have a really good intuition for the math because they've played so many hands and they've played so much. So they're not actually they're not feel players in the sense that like when I say I'm a field player, it would be like a field player. For them, they actually don't realize how much math they're using. They just kind of understand these spots because they've encountered them thousands of times. I don't have that. Like I don't have hundreds of thousands of hands. And so for me, I think using the solvers actually helps me do that and actually get some of the experience that I would have had, if I'd been playing for 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point you brought up, though, about people who would consider themselves more of exploit players or more field players, is that they do have a really good intuition of just math and pattern recognition in the spots and situations. And you're right, you played thousands of different kind of moments like that. I mean, I kind of was talking the other day with with Sasha. Shout out to Sasha in the other room. I think Sasha might have a question a little bit later too. Shout out to my girl Sasha. And we were talking about that, and I was like, I always about the idea of math and myself, and I'm like, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm good at math, but like I'm never like sitting in my head thinking it out. Like, all right, I need 33%. I just sort of intuitively have a really, really strong understanding of almost all these spots when I play them, just because I played them a million times. And when you first start off, you do dumb shit, and you're like, okay, well, I lost there. Well, that's not good. Do you feel like you picked up on those things pretty quickly? Because at tournaments, I know it's pretty hard. You might make the right play multiple different times, but you might play for a 18-hour or 12. I mean, I guess these aren't 3-day tournaments, but you might play for 6 hours, get all in with kings, run into queens, and hit a queen. And it's kind of hard to really, after the fact, process, did I play well? Did I play bad? And how have you found that for you when you're sort of trying to review your own play and go over your own results?
Yeah, I think that because it is a little bit more difficult in live tournaments to kind of have that immediate feedback, I think that it is really important to actually kind of think through the thought process. And for me, it's been to figure out how I've played. One of the best things was after a tournament, sitting down with Eric, and being like, okay, like, let's go through my hands. Let's figure out how I played. And even if I busted on, day 2 or whatever, or day 1 of a multi-day tournament, and I played well, then that's totally fine. He's been very good at teaching me kind of the attitude of not being results oriented and saying, okay, the most important thing is that you played well. And sometimes, I do something absolutely horrifyingly stupid and I suck out. That doesn't mean I played well. Like, I just got ridiculously lucky.
Are you sure? Hey, I don't know. That means you played well. The people I know, they think they're great players because.
So I think it is really important. I think you raise a really important point. It's really good to actually review the thought process and be like, okay, and because I know I'm going to be talking through these hands with Eric or with Phil, it makes me think through it myself. So like, for instance, so I actually, because I know I'm going to have to justify it to them, be like, okay, why am I raising here? What am I trying to accomplish? And actually just taking a beat to do that and to talk it through with yourself before you do it sometimes helps you avoid really shitty decisions, because you're like, what am I trying to accomplish? And then you're like, oh, wait, only better hands are going to call me. Like, this is actually a very stupid bluff. I shouldn't do it. And then you don't do it. And you would have done it because that was your first instinct. But then talking through it says, actually, my thought process is wrong here. So that's what I try to do. And then I do kind of, I studied early on, like the odds of certain things happening, just so that I knew them. Because for me, it's not like I had lots of times to be like, okay, this is how often your flush is going to come in, et cetera. So I actually kind of studied that. And then I've gotten into some situations where I'm like, oh, this is what 2% feels like when you get it all in with ace jack versus ace jack.
How's it feel, Maria? How's it feel? Tell us how it feels.
It does not feel good.
It does not feel good.
That was actually on the bubble of a World Series event. And that was the only time where I had the entire room erupt in applause when I busted a tournament.
Damn.
I was like, all right, guys, thanks. Thank you for clapping for me. I'm glad I made your day. That's what 2% felt like.
Yeah, I always say, like, when you got 2%, it's not a good feeling out there. You're not gonna. I mean, it feels like it's 0%. It's 2% actually, though.
Exactly, and 2% happens 2% of the time. So
it turns out we don't need to be math experts to know that. I mean, exactly. I don't know. I feel like for me, it turns out more. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I feel like it turns out close to like 7 because if I go through a lot of my hand histories from the past, and there's a little bit where I feel like I'm winning a little bit too many of my 2 to 5%. So for me, maybe I just run a little bit better than most people do. But I think for most people, 2% feels like 0% or negative 100%. So it's kind of a very, very weird. We can all relate to that sort of thing. Poker players out there in the chat right now. Someone said in the chat that they're happy I dressed up for this podcast. Well, this is my regular outfit. I normally wear my GTO's Way of Life tank top or some tank top, and I wear my hat. I'm gonna get a haircut soon, guys. This is the last time you're gonna see me with long hair. Nice. Enjoy it while it is. I'm shaving it all off, and I'm going something new for World Series of Poker, Maria. I'm going something new.
Oh, yeah?
You I definitely am. You mentioned something really, really good, which was that you having to talk out these hands with other players forces you to have to learn how to talk out a hand with other players. And in the process, that helps you understand why you're doing the things that you're doing. So even simple things like, why am I c-betting here? Why am I turn c-betting here? And then you start breaking down all the different variables that goes into the decision that you're making. And when you have somebody to talk with who understands poker at a high level, and you're like this, they're like, well, I mean, maybe you want to consider this. And then okay, you go from there, and then your process starts to get better and better as you explain more and more hands. And I think that is the single biggest thing that helped me out in my early stages, was having a group of friends that we would discuss every single hand with. And I think it's something that a lot of players out there right now don't have, because whether their friends suck or whether like they just don't talk to anyone because they're sort of like, they're introverted, or they don't know how to have that approaching conversation to build a relationship with someone to talk hands. But I think that's really one of the most important things you can do for your poker game, is to just have those discussions. And it sounds like for you, that process of having to explain yourself to these other players and explain the hands really was helpful to you, because you mentioned in the moment sort of taking that step back, taking a few extra seconds to say, okay, like let me walk this through in my mind from what I've been learning how to do, and then let me go from there. Yeah,
for sure. I think it's really probably, if I had to say, like, this is the single most important thing, it's definitely that. And it still is, because the more you talk it through, and you also get so many different opinions when you're talking with a few players. Like sometimes I'll run the same hand by a few people, and one person will be like, oh, I would have played it exactly the same. And the other person's like, well, like, would you consider doing X or Y? And it also helps me think through why I'm not doing something, which is really important for my mental game, because one of the challenges for me early on, and actually still something that I struggle with, is not feeling like a total imposter out of my element. Because early on, I'd let people bully me really easily, because I'd be like, oh, well, I guess I don't really know anything about poker. I'm just gonna like take the passive line here, even if it's not the right thing to do. And that was all an emotional and a mental problem rather than a strategic problem. Like sometimes I would even know, because I'd studied it, okay, in this spot, like I'm supposed to raise, like, not 100% of the time, because nothing's 100% of the time, but like, 90% of the time. And instead, because they basically hardly ever have it, or whatever the thought process is, and instead I just fold, even though I knew what I was supposed to do, because I was a little scared, and I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to fold. But recognizing that and knowing that you're going to have to say, okay, why did I fold here? Why did I check here? Why didn't I c-bet here? Like those lacks of action instead, that helped me identify that and actually become more confident. Be like, okay, actually I'm supposed to c-bet here, and there's no justification for not c-betting, so I'm going to c-bet. Because the reason for why aren't I c-betting can't be I'm afraid that this is going to happen, right? That's
So
a bad reason.
how did you learn that part though? So how did you identify in the moment that this is a spot that I should be c-betting, but my own sort of mental game, for whatever reason, is saying I shouldn't here? How did you sort of identify that, and then how did you learn that that was a spot to be c-betting?
Yeah, so I originally identified some of those spots by seeing how other people played, how better players played those spots, and was like, okay, why, and by realizing that I was actually making it really easy to play against me, because in certain spots, like I would never c-bet, and then that said something about my hand strength, because I'd only, like if it was a scary looking board, like if it was a monotone board, I would just never c-bet if I didn't have at least something. And then I realized actually monotone boards, when you start working with different solvers, when you start looking at how different players play, like actually that can be a really good c-betting spot in certain situations, even if you did completely miss it. It obviously depends, but so realizing that I was just making myself an open book by doing certain things, because if you actually put yourself in the other player's position and you're like, okay, if I'm playing against someone who's playing like me, I'd be thrilled, because I would know exactly how to win. I could exploit me 100% of the time. And I was like, shit, that's not good. So now how do I get over that fear? And sometimes it would be one of these things where I was like, oh no, but theoretically I can value bet here, but it's pretty thin. And what if they check raise me? And that's not a good way to be thinking either. Like that's playing scared, and that's not a way that you should really ever be playing. You should realize, you know what, I'm value betting for a reason, and we'll see what happens if they check raise me. Let's just take it one step at a time. But I'm not going to lose value just because I'm afraid that they're gonna try to do something. And so it's, and like I said, it's still an ongoing process. It's not like now I'm perfect. The more I learn, the more leaks I realize I have, and the more things I realize I have to address, and the tougher the game becomes.
For sure, that's how it goes. I feel like what you said took me like 5 years playing online to learn, which is that the bad players should never stack. Like the bad regulars should never stack. They should never stack you. They should never get free shirts of value from you, because their patterns are so easily defined, and their ranges are so unbalanced, and their turns and river ranges are so much more weighted towards strength and have it, and they sort of show their hand too much on the flop when they have a strong hand. So like that's something that you don't really pick up on until you get to a certain level, and it's certainly something I don't hear a lot of poker players enunciate quite like that, because it's sort of, but it does that's actually a big identifying thing between, from my experience, between small stakes players and mid stakes players, and sort of like okay players to really good players, is sort of the really good players are able to identify those things in other opponents really quickly. So when you see someone who's very transparent, for the most part, obviously they're going to mix up some things and not be completely transparent 100% of the time, but they're fairly transparent in their strategy, and it might work against bad players, but it doesn't work against someone who's really good oftentimes. And I mean, that's just like, that's a very big thing to pay. How did you learn that right there? Did you learn that from study something, or did you sort of like intuitively learn that yourself, or how'd you pick up on that?
Just I'm not quite sure what, like there wasn't one thing that was like aha light bulb moment, but I think it was just immersing myself so much and studying all the time, and actually watching a lot of these patterns, and then watching some not great players as well, and then you kind of compare how like the really amazing elite players play as compared to those, and you're like, oh interesting. Like you can actually start seeing it. And when you're watching streams, if you're really watching them, and the way I watch them is I'll pause a lot, I'll take notes, like I'll actually analyze it rather than just kind of watch it all the way through. When you do that and you're not in it, when you're not actually playing, it helps you to actually analyze, because you're not emotionally involved, you're not tired, you're watching it hopefully in a comfortable place where you're mentally with it and alert. And then what I would do is actually kind of try to apply that at the table when I am playing, because you don't have as many resources, especially if you're like 10 hours in, like you're tired. Sometimes you don't, and you get moved to a new table. Sometimes like it's hard to pick up on some of this stuff. But once you do, I was reinforced very well, because a few times when I picked up on something like that in a player, I was then able to just rake in the chips. And I was like, okay, this is actually really useful to be able to spot those patterns. Be like, this guy bets huge, like he has huge bet sizing tells. Like he will bet huge if he doesn't want me to call him. Like he actually does it the opposite of what he should be doing, which is betting bigger when he's trying to extract value from me. Like he'll bet very small if he has something, or he'll check. He'll always trap. And when he just wants me to fold, he'll overbet. If you can identify a pattern like that, that's gold.
I feel like that's definitely one of the beginner patterns that I think you look for when you play poker. You sort of look for these like very apparent bet sizing tells, and then you say, oh, this guy, are they going to ever fix that? And that's sort of could be sometimes like a dangerous assumption to go off on, especially when you're going to make a big call, and then he's like, all right, got top set, and you're like, fuck, okay. And so and then people like get in their mind and they're like, well, was that a good read? Like, was I right? Like, am I wrong? And sometimes it might just be that spot he happened to have it, but a majority of the time he's betting too big, and you shouldn't let that get into your mind and then throw off your sort of your read, or throw off that assumption on other players that you play against, because it could be. And I mean, this sort of problem is what happens to a lot of poker players. They get in their head, they make a play, it wasn't right. They're like, well, fuck, maybe that was bad. And they don't ever do it again, when actually it might have been good. It's just the situation happened to turn out a certain type of way.
For sure. And I've actually like stacked off bluffed in certain spots where I've been hero called, and, I've been out of a tournament, and, it's very easy to be like, shit, like I should never have done that. But it could have been the right play, because 90% of the time you get folds. Right. And you actually like win a huge pot, and you just happen to be kind of playing against the guy who in that particular moment decided to hero call you. But it was actually a really good spot to do that. And trying to kind of get away from the results when, like you said, when in this particular spot they happen to have it, I think can be really useful. Sometimes, I was actually just playing a tournament where there was a guy who would check raise whenever he didn't have anything, and he would never check raise with a really strong hand. And once you see a few showdowns, especially if you're playing with someone for a long time, that's really useful. So I actually try to put away my phone, and I really try to pay attention and like see when I'm not in a hand, get as much information as I can. And I'm not talking, I don't really think when people say, oh, you have a psychology background, like, can you tell when someone's lying? I'm like, no, it's not really like that. Like you can't it's not like all of a sudden like their eye starts twitching, but you can start seeing certain patterns of behavior, which, you could probably see online as well. It's not just live poker where you suddenly see like bet timing tells. They're real in live poker for sure. And once you see a few showdowns, once you see how they're playing against other players, you actually have a lot of information to go on. That said, like I would never base my decisions solely based on that. I think that can be a really good deciding factor when you're trying to figure out, like, is this the time that I'm going to raise this hand, or is this the time that I'm not going to? Like when you're trying to push that edge a little bit, I think then you use those types of patterns. But sometimes you just ignore them, and I think it's important to also sometimes ignore them. And to realize that sometimes you just need to play a hand a certain way.
Yeah, that's the classic mental problem we run into when we play poker. It's like, is this the time we shove it in? I don't know. You said and mentioned, you keep talking about bluffing a lot. I don't know. I don't ever play no home tournaments, but if I do, I don't plan to fold to you now. I don't know yet. Are you worried about that meta game now? People hear that you're. Someone said in the chat, if somebody uses strategic, that means they're an aggressive player. I never actually thought about that, but maybe that's true. If someone does use the word strategic, they could be on this side of aggression.
Well, I used to have the problem that I really didn't bluff enough, and so I've tried to remedy it. I hope that I've become much more balanced, and this is actually something where the Heads Up course really helped me, because it helps you play with a much wider range and understand how to do that, which really helped me kind of open up my game and actually, find more creative bluffs and spots where like you don't normally expect to show up with certain hands, or where you don't have that much, and becoming much more sensitive. Before, when I was playing, I didn't realize just how much I had to think about bet sizing, that you actually can bluff a different amount depending on how you're betting. And that made me much more sensitive to that. And so it's not like every single time I'm sitting at the table, I'm like, okay, I have, this many combination of value hands, so I'm going to have this many bluffs. You can't go through that thought process every single time, especially if it's a shot clock tournament. Then you kind of have 30 seconds and you've got to figure it out. But to at least have a sense of it, I think that I've gotten much better at getting over the fear of, oh no, like what happens if they call me and I'm going to be forced to show them 5 high, that it's not a big deal. Someone told me that if you're never caught bluffing, you're not bluffing enough. And I think that's very true.
People are going to go broke listening to that shred out there. But I would agree. I think once you have an understanding of things, then yeah, you probably should. But I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. You mentioned you play too tight when you start up. I think that's probably a good way to play, because when you're playing so many hands and you get yourself in so many spots where you don't know what to do, you're just not going to be winning when you get into those spots. So approaching it from a sort of like a tight, extremely tight standpoint, and then progressively loosening up as you start to learn more and more, I think that's a good strat. But most people start on the extreme looseness side of things because they took the heads up course and they see Doug playing 100% of his hands heads up, and they're like, okay, I'm 9-handed full ring, I can play all my hands heads up. When in reality, it's a different situation, different circumstances, and they take the things that they learn from a course like that and they misapply it to like a under the gun versus middle position sort of spot. And while some of the things might be relevant, but for the most part, it's often not. I think that's what happens is people like, okay, I should bluff more, and then they like make a couple bad bluffs, and they're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't bluff more, So like that's sort of what happens. They just don't understand where they should bluff more. It's just hard to learn. You make it sound it's pretty inspiring stuff. To be honest with you, you make it sound really easy. Like the press, I've always thought, like, I've tried working with so many different poker players as they're trying to learn. I'm like, man, like I probably suck as the actual teacher from that standpoint too. But I mean, then you see how they struggle with it, and it takes people years to be able to grasp these things, if ever. And I feel like you picked up on a lot of advanced things that I don't really hear even a lot of seasoned poker players really discuss. And I think, it sounds like it was like a combination of study, of actual sort of watching poker, going through hands, talking hands with friends, talking hands in your mind, I'm sure hours and hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yep.
And then just a lot of consistent deep thought, whether it's by yourself or whether it's with other players on poker on a pretty daily basis.
For sure. And I mean, that's something that I think is one of my strengths. When I really want to learn something, I just immerse myself in it. And I really try to make the studying count. I really try to get the most out of it. I think my other strength is I'm very, very happy because I've spent my whole life, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, around people who are much smarter than I am. And that's always been my strategy. As a writer, one of the best things for writing for the New Yorker was I could always reach out to like the smartest people or the best people in certain areas and be like, hey, like, tell me, I don't know. I know nothing, like, give me your wisdom. And I love doing that because I think that it's one of the most inspiring things in the world to learn from people who are better than you are. And so I think that coming from a background where I've always had to say, I don't know, I don't understand, and being okay with that has really helped me learn, because I don't mind if I'm the worst player at a table. Actually, sometimes that's really good because you can learn from the people who are better than you. One of the things that I love whenever I play a tournament that's a little bit above my pay grade, so to speak, where I'm with players who are really much better than I am. The first, it's intimidating, obviously, but also it's a chance to really learn from them. And when you're playing with them, you're forced to really learn. So like I had one experience a few months ago where I had Adrian Mateos to my direct left. And when I sat down, I was like, oh no, like this is going to suck. And it sucked. It was horrible. But I learned so much because he's very aggressive. But he's smart aggressive. He's not stupid aggressive, right? He knows exactly how to do it in a way that makes him really hard to play with. There are some people who are just crazy aggressive, and I can deal with that. I know how to adjust. But how do you adjust against someone who's aggressive in the right way? It's really hard. And so you just watch and admire and learn. And you're like, you know what? I'm not going to get a lot of chips at this table. I'm just going to play tight and kind of, sure, this time I'm going to make my game transparent. I don't always have to be balanced. I don't always have to bluff. Like, I'm just going to wait for the spots where he's not in a pot, like where I don't actually have to go up against him. Or if I'm up against him, like, sure, maybe I'll play in a little bit more of a straightforward way, but I'm learning. Like, I'm not actually at the stage where I can try to kind of outthink him, out-level him.
Right.
Exactly, which is totally fine. Let me just learn from him. And I don't feel the need to win every pot. I don't feel the need to kind of always show, that I'm the best player. I'm okay if people, like I've had tournaments where I've just been having an off day, like I didn't sleep well, I'm tired. And I'm sure that there are people who've played with me at that moment who's like, oh my God, she sucks. And that's fine. Like, I don't care if people come away with that impression. Actually, that's good for me, because then the next time when I'm on top of my game, they'll remember that I sucked, and that'll be great. But I've never minded, being kind of the bottom person on the ladder. And I think that one of the things I've seen in a lot of poker players is a little bit too much ego. And so I think, so I think that that's helped me learn, because I really listen when someone critiques me, and I take it to heart, and I think about it. And I probably think about it a little too much, but I internalize it, and I try to figure out, how do I address that? How do I make myself better? My goal is not to win every tournament. It's to grow and to become a better player, and to kind of be at a place where I see that my game is improving, my thought process is improving. And as long as that's true, then I'm happy. If that's not true, then obviously something's wrong. But as long as I can see my thought process getting better, and I can look back, for me, one of the great things is when I can look back at a tournament that I played, say, a month ago, and was like, oh my God, what was I thinking here? This was really stupid, because that means I'm improving and I'm better than the me that played the tournament last time.
Mm. So how do you gauge that in real time? Is it something you retrospectively look back on, or what do you sort of, like, what are you thinking about that says, okay, I am improving, or I am getting better?
I think it is retrospectively. It's really hard to do in the moment. Sometimes I'll go and I'll be like, oh my God, I kicked ass. I did so well. And you're like, actually, no, I just sucked out here and I sucked out here.
But I still kicked ass doing it.
Exactly. And then you realize that I actually didn't play that well. And sometimes I'll be very down on myself. I'll be like, oh man, like, why did I just punt off my whole stack? And then I'll go through the hand, I'll think through it. In those cases, I'll actually go through PO Solver, and, when PO validates me, it was like, actually, no, you punt off your stack here. That it's like, okay, that wasn't stupid. I actually played well. I just took a line that's new for me, but it worked out. And one of the things that I do try to do is when I'm working on something, so I'll actually work on specific things. I'll identify certain things that I'm not doing well. Like one of the things that I really need to work on is 4-bet bluffing. Like, my 4-bet bluffing range is off. Like, it's hard for me to be balanced in some of those spots. And so that's something that I'm specifically addressing. And so I'll actually kind of think through, okay, why don't I try it with this kind of range? And now let me go back, let me backtrack buy-ins, let me go back to $100 tournament, a tournament that really won't affect my bankroll at this point to that great an extent, and let me try it out. Let's see how the strategy is working. And obviously it's a different caliber player, but still, like, it's a way of testing out the new strategy and figuring out, is it working? Is it working for me? And also getting comfortable doing it. Because you can't, one of the things I learned very early on is, even if you're quote unquote supposed to bluff in a certain spot, but you're not comfortable doing it, you're going to get picked off, because you're screaming to the whole table, I'm not comfortable making this play, but I'm forcing myself to do it. And that's bad. You don't want to be that person. So you have to kind of always play the same way with the same confidence. And in order to do that, you need to do it multiple times so that you actually are comfortable in this spot. And it really helps me to say, I'm not actually bluffing here. Like, I have a very good reason for doing what I'm doing. Like, it's a play that's strategically correct, not I'm bluffing. And then it helps free me up a little bit. So that's kind of how I do it. And it's still tough. So sometimes I'll be working on something like, 4-bet bluffing correctly for a long time. And I still realize that, actually I kind of screwed up, and now I'm, my ranges are still off. So it's a constant process as my game evolves, and also as the players I play against change. I think that's really important too. You have to adjust. Like, sometimes I'm insanely tight when I'm at a crazy table. Like you say, when I've traveled all over the world, in different parts of the world, people play differently. Like sometimes people will be much tighter and sometimes they'll be just totally crazy. And when everyone is totally crazy, I'm not going to open up my range. Some people are like, oh, well, I need to play more hands. I'm like,
Right,
no,
exactly.
okay, I'm actually going to.
They think that some of these players they perceive as bad or making bad decisions post flop. Therefore, I can open up my range because they're playing so many hands, and I think that I'm better than them post flop, and I'm going to take advantage of these mistakes. And
exactly. Yeah.
I believe me, that happens to me a lot too. I've still playing. I'm like, all right, I don't need to do this, and I'm like, and then you get stacked, and then it happens. Okay, so
yep. And then you get really pissed. You're like, I got stacked by one of those players last week where I had aces cracked by 6 deuce offsuit that he somehow decided to call my under the gun raise with on the button. And you know what? When that happens, you're like, okay, you know what? that just happened, and that's fine. And you want that person at your table every single time, obviously.
You're saying when you don't lose to 6 deuce offsuit with aces, you don't go outside. You're not texting your friends. You're like, this guy's the worst player of all time. You're not. A lot of my people in the chat, that's what they actually do when they lose a hand. They'll be like, this Jimmy, he got, they like freak out. You don't spaz out like that. You don't have those freak out moments.
And that's thanks to Eric. He very early on told me that I was not ever allowed to tell him a bad beat story ever. And if I ever told him, like if I started saying, oh, I just busted the tournament, I had queens, and he's like, wait, stop. Do you have a question about the hand you busted out on or not? And I was like, well, no, but he's like, okay, then that's the end of the story. Just not I had queens, but I busted, period. I don't want to know what your bust out hand was unless it was a hand that there was a thought process and you're not actually sure you played it correctly, in which case let's see your bust out hand. And so he would just completely go to town on me and shut me up and basically tell me that you can't ever be in the habit of telling your bad beats to people because that's the wrong way of thinking about it. And he has a very good analogy. He's like, it's like shitting on someone else's lawn, which I actually think is really, really accurate because you're putting your trash, like your like the stuff that's bothering you, and you're putting it on someone else's lap and being like, oh my God, can you believe it? I had queens and he had jacks and he hit his jack on the river. Oh my God. And there went my tournament, and I played so well for so many days. And that's a bad thought habit, but it's also bad for you because it's not where you want to be mentally. Instead, you want to be like, I got it in good. I played as well as I could. I got it in as a huge favorite. I want him to call me in this spot every single time. And I just happened not to win this particular time. And so I think it's very useful. But that's not, I wanted to tell my bad beats right away at the beginning. And it's because he's been very, very strict with me. That I have, I think, a much healthier attitude now. And I've gotten to the point where I actually don't remember a lot of my bust out hands. Unless it was a problematic hand, I actually forget it. So you're like, oh, what happened? How did you bust? I'm like, actually, I don't remember. And that's kind of cool.
Place many people aspire to get to right there, Maria. I do think that it's sort of that when you tell a bad beat story, it is negative self-talk in a lot of ways. Even if you're talking to yourself, you're sort of negatively replaying it in your mind. And I'm sure you're very big on the idea of self-talk and these sorts of ideas. Sure. And I think like as you keep explaining it more and more, it sort of just has this effect that keeps building and building on yourself to the point where you just have all these negative thoughts in your mind, and you're only talking about negative hands and these negative moments with your friends or with other people that or with yourself a lot of times, that it just goes and goes and goes. And I think that's why you see a lot of poker players sort of unhappy, is they always remember these bad moments that happen, but they don't really remember any of the good moments. And I've tended to be the same way in my career, where I don't really remember, except the backdoor quad, the Aria for 16K pot at 2-5-10. I vividly remember that to my drunk guy, Leo. Shout out to Leo. I remember that hand vividly, but besides that, I don't really remember too many of the hands I lost. I remember a lot of hands I won that were big.
Yeah.
Hands. So it's like, I do think that's a big thing you see in a lot of poker players when you work with them or when you coach them, is the way they talk to themselves and the way they talk to you about hands really, I mean, that's a very quick indicator on sort of how they think about poker and probably if they're winning or losing at poker.
Well, and I think it helps you become a stronger player because you want your headspace to not be filled with negative stuff. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I think about hands all the time. And sometimes like I can't sleep because I'm just going over a hand in my mind, but it's not a bad beat hand. It's a hand that I misplayed, or a hand that I think I might have misplayed,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just kind of thinking through it, and it's bothering me because I'm not quite sure there's something wrong, but it's not because I got one outed or whatever happened. Yeah, sure, it sucks. But then you have to actually occupy your mind in a productive way, not a counterproductive way. And that's counterproductive. That means that you're not actually thinking about how to improve. You're not thinking about how to get yourself ready for the next tournament. You're not actually trying to kind of get up and move on. And instead you're just wasting time and getting yourself down. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like, one outers happen, two outers happen. We've hit them, we've been on both sides of them, and that's variance. And that's okay. Variance isn't fun, but you know what? Variance is very fun when it's on your side.
Real talk right there. Definitely real talk. Variance is very fun when it's on your side. It's true.
Sometimes you have those days where you're
true.
where you're hitting everything and you're like, wow, this is unfair, but it's awesome. I'm not complaining. Has anyone ever complained when they've hit a one outer? I don't think so.
I've never complained when I hit a one outer. I am jubilant beyond belief when I hit a one outer.
Exactly.
I guess. Well, so what's been your biggest thing you've learned about poker players? You mentioned earlier about their big ego, which a lot of players, in many different ways, like some are evident why they have big egos, and it makes sense. I think that you do need to have a big ego to believe in yourself that you can compete in a game like poker,
Sure.
and a lot of other games that are maybe similar to poker in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But what's sort of been your biggest realizations about the poker players that you've met around the world?
The thing that really impressed me the most, and was a total realization to me, because all I knew about poker players was kind of some stereotypes and some movies, and so I had kind of this very skewed picture in my mind. It's been really impressive to me how many like truly just brilliant, really intelligent people there are among good poker players, that they could really be successful at anything they wanted to do. And they do poker because they love it, and because that's actually it's their chosen profession, and it is a profession, and they work hard, and they're smart, and they're good, and they're fun. And that was a total surprise. Like, I thought it would be all bros who were, just kind of who want to gamble. And some of whom, gambled harder than others. And sure, you have some of those people there, but I've actually been really impressed at how many people there are who I could see like being successful doctors or whatever it is. And that's really cool. It's actually really inspiring. And it's one of the reasons I've really been enjoying myself. I've found just the most fascinating people who have all sorts of interests, and who have taught me a lot.
Yeah, I definitely think that the people that play in high rollers, specifically in tournaments, because I had a lot of guys. I mainly play cash games, and by mainly I mean only. And I usually conversate. Most of all my friends are all cash game players from online for years now. So, but I've had a lot of tournament guys that I am friends with. A few tournament guys now too. And I think when you speak to some of the high roller guys, they definitely think about poker and life much differently than maybe some of the guys that aren't playing on high rollers. And you mentioned about not meeting the people who are like the gambling and stuff like that. And when you're out here for the World Series of Poker, I'll introduce you to some of the Omaha cash game players. And if you want to meet some guys who play high stakes, kind of smart, but also those degenerate gambling, you're going to meet those. These are the guys you're looking for. Or the guys from 2008 who used to play, and those guys sort of all went broke now. But I mean, I think poker, you can't really be that attitude. Like you mentioned that attitude. Those guys are there. It's just like, you're not meeting them because they're not studying. They're not working. They're not talking about their hands. They've been playing for 7 years, and they're over thinking about how to get better. And they sort of resign to their fate of being whatever it is they can be in poker until they get out of poker. So, but I definitely think that sort of in the circle of people you're talking with, I mean, Jay Kuhn, Ike Hollywood Haxton, Eric Seidel, talking with some guys here, man. These guys are very smart guys. These guys could probably do anything they really wanted to do. And that's certainly, you mentioned kind of the company you keep and the people that you talk to and those sorts of things. And I mean, yeah, those are a great company to keep. And I think it's definitely going to give you that outlook on poker when you speak to people like that. Some people are going to have different viewpoints when they say they play home games, they play with like, these degenerate, you know what I mean? I get where everyone's coming from. There's all sorts of people in poker. That's what makes it fun to me.
For sure. And I actually, this is something that I haven't done. I haven't really played cash. Like, I have played a few cash games in my life. It's not like I've never played cash, just to get a feel for it. But I've never gone to a casino and been like, all right, let's play whatever it is, 1, 3, 2, 5, like 5, 10. I haven't played any cash games like that. I've actually really focused on tournaments. And I do wonder whether I would have had a very different experience had I decided to focus on cash instead. And I think the answer is probably yes.
I mean, I don't know. Your experience sounds pretty good now. I normally don't say focus on tournaments. That sounds like you had a. I'm
happy. I like tournaments a lot. I think that one of the things I like about them is how dynamic they are, and how your strategy really does have to change, you know, from beginning, middle to end of tournament, and how the stakes get higher, you know, as your to stack ratio gets shorter, and all of this stuff. So it's really nice to experience that, and I think it's much more. You know, what I was going for the book originally was kind of poker as a metaphor for life and as a metaphor for different types of decision making. And I think tournaments really model that very well, because there's kind of this drama to them, and there's an arc to them, and there are stages to them. And in a cash game, you're kind of playing at the level you're playing. And so I think it's a little bit different in the sense that your strategy won't change from hour 1 of the cash game to hour 5. But in a tournament, that's really not the case.
Mm-hmm. So I read that you put the book off. The book's on hold now. You're writing the book, and then now the book's not being released for a while, or what's going on with that?
So I'm still working on it, but because I never anticipated that I'd actually, you know, start winning things and actually doing well and improving at the rate that I have been. And I want to take advantage of that, because I think it's really good for me. It's good for the book. It makes it a more interesting narrative. And so I'm still working. I'm writing, you know, after I travel, I take notes, I write down scenes, I kind of take notes on characters. So I have a lot of material. So it's not like the book is done and it's not going to be out. It's just that originally I was supposed to have a first draft done basically around now. And now it's going to be put off until the end of the year. And still hoping that it'll come out in 2019. So not a huge delay, but you know, maybe a little over a year from now.
So kind of right now, you've just been immersing yourself in poker, immersing yourself in study and play. Obviously, we mentioned you've been all over the world, and you said there was different play styles in different countries.
Yeah.
Well, how would you characterize some of the different countries out there from your experience playing with them?
You know, it's also different. What I'm saying will apply to me more so than, say, to you, because I feel like a lot of countries have different attitudes toward women, especially the older players in those countries. And they'll play differently against me because I'm female. And so they'll see you.
Whoa, and people treat females differently in poker than they do men? Is that true?
I know, seriously.
We're allowed to talk about that? I don't know. We're allowed to talk about that. I don't know. I'm with the movement now. You know, I'm going on eggshell. I ain't mentioning nothing until someone else brings it up.
So, like, for instance, and I was born in Russia, so I can talk about Eastern European men. Being Eastern European myself, so when I play like somewhere like Monte Carlo, there are lots of Eastern European men there because there are tons of Russians in Monte Carlo. And the older ones, this isn't as much true of the younger ones, who are more like GTO players who are just really good. And they don't care if, you know, I'm a woman or an eggplant. They're going to play in a very similar way against me. But a lot of the older ones, they'll see me and they'll be like, what the hell are you doing here? You should be in the kitchen cooking. You really should not be. Yeah, no, seriously, you really shouldn't be. They don't say that as such, but that's their attitude. And so they will just try to, you know, relentlessly bluff me and raise me off of anything. Their attitude is, I can get her to fold whatever. And it's really wonderful when I get one of those at the table, because once I realize that that's the kind of player they are, then they just give me their chips. You know, I'm always going to fold to them exploitatively, even when I would call someone else. And then I'm going to check. I'm going to check 100% of my range. It's really easy because I know that they're going to bet 100% of the time. And so I can actually stack them quite frequently, and I do. But that's not true of all men. So like when I played in Macau, for instance, it's not like all of the Asian men were trying to relentlessly bluff me. They actually thought that I would be much tighter because I'm female. And so they would often fold really strong hands to me face up, because they assume that if I, raise them and then bet again, and if I triple barreled, that means that I must have like the absolute stone cold nuts. And so like they would fold middle set, like they would fold things that were really kind of insane. And once I realized that they were doing that, I started actually shifting my range and bluffing a lot more. So if you figure out how they perceive female players, that can be incredibly useful. And that's something that really does change depending on what country you're in, depending on how old someone is. And it's something that is not GTO, but is very good when you're playing live. It's obviously not true online because no one really knows who you're playing against. But live, it's become something that's been incredibly useful to me. And I realized that I'm also generalizing. Like there are some older Russian men who really respect me and don't actually do that and realize that I know that they know, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a overgeneralization, but stereotypes are good because they're very useful, because usually they come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned like a thing that I think about a lot, which is the idea of exploiting someone's sort of like very apparent weakness, what they're doing. So you mentioned the obvious one there is, okay, you have a player who's constantly trying to bluff you. And some players, maybe they're constantly folding very strong hands to when you raise.
Mm-hmm.
My sort of idea I always thought about online was, okay, if I know these players are just folding to so much aggression, well, do I want to take advantage of that more or take advantage of that less, but be selective in it more? Do like how do I want to approach that to the point where I don't overexploit it? So then they start being so obvious to them that, oh my God, they're fucking doing this to me.
Yeah.
That's something I've gone back and forth. I first start off as like, okay, I'm going to exploit this to the max. This is oftentimes with players you play with often, sort of maybe have a dynamic, but even against weaker players, you might say, okay, well, let me do something here differently because I just think they're doing this too much, or they're doing this that much. And that I think that balance is for sure interesting to think about in its own way, because the idea of overexploitation and fixing their leaks and that sort of thing, especially with you, if these people are folding middle set to you, I'm never folding middle. Listen, Maria, I don't know if we're gonna play. I don't care. You can show me your hand, my folding middle set to you. I'm just not. You said bluff.
Good.
You said bluff too many times for me to full middle set. I'm never full middle set to you ever. That's me.
Good to know. Good to know.
It's just me. So now you're gonna bluff me less. Then I'm gonna start full middle set to you because I know you're bluffing me less now. See?
Exactly, and so it goes. But no, I think that's actually a really important point, and you do have to strike a line where they don't realize what they're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually, one of the things that Eric taught me is never show your hand unless you have to. Don't give away free information, no matter what, basically. And I've only gone against that a few times. And I've always had kind of a very good reason in my mind. One of them was there was a guy who was just folding to my 3-bets 100% of the time. And once I realized that, I started 3-betting him more. And then once he got really mad, he's like, oh my God, like, I can't believe you 3-bet me again. And I was like, sorry. Then the next time I had queens, so I 3-bet him again. And he just got really mad. And he's like, this is the last time. And he folded and I showed him the queens. I'm like, I'm sorry. I always have it against you. And that actually calmed him down. So then I could keep 3-betting him. But the reason I showed the queens there was because he was getting mad and he was about to adjust and play back. And I didn't want him to. So I wanted him to just think that I was going on an insane run of cards, which I wasn't. I just happened to have queens.
I'm never folding middle set to you. Listen, if any of you guys out there fold middle set to Maria, we gotta sign you up for Upswing Poker. They teach you not to fold middle set to people.
After this conversation, I'm never gonna bluff anyone ever again. I promise. So just full, if I 3-barrel, I have it. I promise.
I think you're sick enough to maybe be the tightest player in the world and be saying some of these things, and that people play with you, and they're like, man, she had top set every time, man. I don't know what you're talking about. She had aces every single time. I don't know. This could be some reverse. As a psychological wizard of the dark arts as yourself, I feel like this could be some reverse psychology where you're telling us that you're a little bit out of line, but really you're selective. You're very in line, but you have that occasion to throw that little dun in your game and then be out of line a little bit.
Yeah, that might very well be.
This is so meta. This is a lot of metagame happening here, guys. You're right. Jack Fleming, shout out to my guy Jack. This is definitely there is definitely some deep metagame happening here. But I think you bring up a lot of interesting points. You know, is that I think a lot of these things you talked about to learn poker. I mean, this is kind of like a blueprint. What you've just said is in a lot of ways a blueprint for people learning or wanting to learn poker, wanting to get better at poker, and honestly, people that are professional poker players and just how to improve and how to think about the idea of study, because we always talk about study on here. People come on here, how do you get better? I study. And people are like, well, what does that even mean? Like, what is study? What do you do? Like, you just sit there and watch things. And I just think the way that you've explained it and laid out your process is exactly what people should be doing in terms of this intense study, in terms of this dedication to being consumed by it, just dedicating your mind and your thoughts to the hands and the situations. And I mean, there's actually a lot of things that'd be really hard to teach someone these sorts of things and have them take it all in that quickly. It's still going to be definitely a process too. But yeah, I think it's a very good sort of like blueprint. And do you intend to maybe like lay this out in the book, or will the book be like, what exactly storyline or narrative are you going for with the book that you're writing?
Yeah, I mean, the book is definitely not a strategy book. You know, there are much better poker players out there who will lay out all of that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm going for. It's going to be, it's much more just narrative. It's kind of the story of me doing this, of me in this world. So, you know, I'm thinking of it much more kind of like a movie than as a like step by step, you know, but obviously some of the things I've done to study, that's part of the narrative. Right, that's actually part of the scenes, the situations, the encounters, because that's how I've been growing. There's not going to be a chapter about like, these are the videos that I watched on Run It Once, and these were my favorite. Like that's not going to be. It's not like that. But I'm always very happy to kind of share what resources I've found helpful, because I think it's great. And even though poker is, unlike a lot of other things, a zero-sum game, you know, if I win, you lose, if you win, I lose. But still, I think that it would be awesome for more people to actually use these resources because they're so good, and to try to get better, because then it poses a challenge to everyone else, and it forces you to kind of keep learning and keep improving. And I think that's really cool, because I think poker would be really, really boring if you were like, all right, I'm the best now, I'm awesome. I'm done learning. Like, now I'm just going to do the same thing over and over.
Fader Holes you're mentioning. Okay, Fader, you're mentioning Fader Holes. So, yeah, he got bored and he went to go start Prime Mind. So, yeah.
So one of the things that I love about it is that it is so dynamic, and that there's always more to learn and more levels to the game, and you can always go deeper, and that it's always such a challenge kind of intellectually and emotionally, because it is, you know, I didn't appreciate when I was getting into it just how hard it is, you know, that it really is like a full body sport, that you're working hard, you know, you're to be concentrated, to be with it, to actually be on top of it for 12, 13, 14 hours at a time is insane. And then to do it all again in the morning, if you're going to be playing well. I never realized just how much it takes out of you and how hard a job it really is. So a lot of people, you know, they think, this is, I think, true of both writing and poker. When people find out I'm a writer, they're like, oh, you know, I've got a great book in me. Like, I know how to write, so I can be a writer. It's really easy. And I think it's the same thing with poker, where people are like, oh, this is easy. Like, let me just do this and make some money. Like, it's actually a really hard way to make money. But as long as it's challenging and interesting and fun, I think fun is very important. There are too many people who take themselves a little too seriously and forget that it's actually a game and that it should be fun as well. As long as it's all of those things, then it's also great and very rewarding. But if any of those things stop being true for me at any point, if I'm no longer having fun, if I'm no longer progressing, if I'm no longer growing, if I no longer find it challenging, then I'd do something else. But
you know what makes poker fun is winning at poker. What makes poker not fun? Losing at poker. That's what happens. It turns out when you're winning, you're like, man, this is great. I love it. This is crazy. I'm traveling. I'm winning all this money. Then you start losing. You're like, man, this sucks. What is going on? I'm traveling 17 hours to lose $10,000.
Yeah,
then that's where it starts happening. Where it's like, you go through a downswing, you go through an upswing. I mean, technically, you mentioned the book's like a movie, and I don't think we've had that what was Molly's game where I guess the crashing of the skis at the beginning of the movie there, but we haven't had that. I think maybe your time is World Series of Poker, maybe one of those like baccarat sessions where you lose your roll, or like a late strip club session with some of the other poker players, and you spend too much. People have their downfalls in all sorts of ways here during the World Series. Do you have a downfall plan for the book? Could something happen? I don't think anything could happen, but could something happen? Because we always need that. We need the art.
I feel like something could always happen, right? Isn't that what poker teaches you? Something can always happen.
I feel like you got something planned, Maria. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think you got something. You got what? You playing the 300K super high roller? Are you one of those extra three? I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it. I think I can see it.
No. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm living it. So we'll see. I hope I don't have a tremendous crash. Don't ever let me go to a baccarat table. I've actually never gambled. In the sense that other than poker, I've never played a single casino game. Like I've never played craps. I've never played baccarat. I've never played blackjack. I don't even know what the other games are. Those are the three that I can rattle off.
Are you strong in prayer? Are you a good prayer?
Yeah, I'm a really good prayer.
Then you'd be good at baccarat, because baccarat's a game of prayer where you put your money in on banker or player and you just pray to God that. I mean, you got to be good at ripping cards and healing in a very, very suspenseful way.
And screaming. One of the things I learned in Macau is you have to be good at screaming. I had no idea what was going on. Someone had to explain to me that they screamed loudly because that would somehow affect the energy of their cards. And to me, that was they scream. In Macau, they scream at the baccarat tables. Yep. So, and then they also
screaming at the poker table, to be honest with you, scream for your card. Jack! I think that might work. A little loud. I'm sorry, guys. That was a little loud.
And then also they blow on their cards because they try to blow the correct number. So that's the other thing. Those are the skills I need to work on.
I know. Wow. I need to write this down. I'm serious. I'm going to work on the screaming and blowing on my cards. I don't know. Shout out to the Asians. The Asians got it down. When they play baccarat, they got those they got the sheet of paper with their okay, that was red and a 7. I'm like, what are they writing? Like, what are they doing? Like, why are they smoking so much? I just got a lot of questions about what they do at the baccarat table.
For sure. I've got a lot of.
You haven't considered, if you do a baccarat, but are you going to sit down and start chain smoking and writing down numbers with all the baccarat players too? Would that be in the immersion process? It's
so funny. There are lots of great poker players who also really enjoy kind of gambling and they think it's really fun. I've had no desire to do that at all. So I don't think I actually have I don't have a high gambling tolerance. It's just because to me poker isn't gambling. It's a skill game with a chance element. But if I want to lose, I can lose. I think that is the kind of the definition of a skill game, is that you can lose on purpose. You can't lose on purpose at baccarat, other than by not playing. Like you can't.
Let me think about this more. Can I lose on purpose at baccarat? I don't know. It's a good point. Okay.
It's a game. It's total chance. Right?
It's a game of prayer. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
The relationship between you and God, and the cards, and the blowing, and the screaming. I'm actually going to try this. I don't know. So I like that you're a good person to ask this. So how much of playing poker do you think is a competitive game against yourself and your own mind and your discipline and executing your strategy and executing what you've learned? And how much of it is a competition against other people?
I think that that's a really good question. And for me, I think the competition against myself is always my strongest driver. You have to be competitive against other people. I don't think you can win if you don't have a competitive streak at all. But I think it can hurt you if you're a little too competitive, because then you have the need to kind of win at all costs. And sometimes that's not going to be your best strategy. And so to me, it's the more important part, I think, more than, if I'm not sure I can give it exact percentages, but maybe like 65% of it is competing with myself and saying, okay, can I challenge myself to be a better player today than I was yesterday? Can I be a stronger player? Can I be a more confident player? Can I do better in this spot? Can I kind of think through this spot better and kind of improve versus myself? Because that's something that I can control, and I can't control other people. And so I think putting too much of your eggs in the like other people basket, there are certain things that you can't change, you can't work on. So why not focus on the thing that you can change and that you can work on? That's, I think, the best use of your resources. That said, there's definitely, you do have to be competitive against other people and figure out, this is part of it as well. Figure out, okay, like who am I competing against? Like, what are the types of competitors and how am I going to play against them? How am I actually going to change? How am I going to adjust? What am I going to look for? And what am I going to do in response? So that's something that you can do with respect to other people. So you can't ignore that either. So I don't know if 65-35 is the right balance, but something roughly along those lines.
Yeah, I think for me, I something I didn't realize till later in my career, poker for me has really always been a competition against myself. Whereas if I get out of line with my pre-flop and with my post-flop, I'm going to lose a lot of money. Whereas when I execute the strategy and execute what I've learned over time, I usually end up winning them. I mean, very consistently. It's just how it's always been for me. And anytime I'm losing, I'm always getting out of line. I'm always doing something messed up. Like, it's just very evident in my face too. And then I started to realize, well, this is mainly a competition against myself. And I think you definitely, at 65-35, I haven't thought about how much percentage I would put in there, but I feel like 70-30, 65-35 is probably pretty correct for me too when I think about it. And obviously there's our elements of you're competing with other people, and there is that competition of figuring out someone. And then I feel like for me, that comes down with the self thing, where you learn how other players play, and then you have to figure out a strategy to beat them. And then if you execute that strategy against them, you're going to beat them. Like, that's sort of how I looked at it. But I think a lot of people look at poker as a very competitive with other people thing, but I really do think you're just like battling so many things in your mind and so many thoughts and so many like, coming to your mind. That's probably a good way to describe it for some people, that you got to get past all that. And then you got to, it's just, there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And if you're focused too much on other people, then you're not focused enough on what you could be doing. And so I think it can actually be really detrimental. Like, if you sometimes I see this happening at the table, and then it's a really good spot for me to exploit. Like, when you see two players develop a really nasty dynamic, like when they start getting into these raising wars, and you can just see that they're trying to, every time they get into it with each other. When you see that, that's a really good opportunity for you, because you realize that they're letting the competition get to them a little bit, and that they're probably are getting out of line, and that they're not playing their optimal strategy. They're actually now focused too much on like getting that guy. And you never want to be the one in one of those leveling dynamics. Like, it can be, those are the moments where like you end up all in pre-flop with absolute junk, and you're not quite sure how you got there, other than, well, he 3-bet and I knew he was light, so I decided to 4-bet, but then he 5-bet, but I still knew he was like, and I think that can really hurt you. So I try, and obviously I'm only human. I'm going to get into those situations sometimes.
You've been all in with it. You've been all in with the 4-5 offsuit before. Don't lie. Don't try. Listen, I'm not no middle set, no jacks, no, I'm not folding anything.
So we've all been in those situations, especially like when I get tired. This is actually some of the best advice I've gotten. I've gotten a lot of good advice, but this was really useful, that near the end of the day, if you're feeling really tired and depleted, just tighten up your range and really just like start playing more straightforwardly, because I often lose like a huge amount of my stack on like the last level of the day, because I'm just tired and like I'm not thinking as well, and I don't quite realize it. And so like I'll get into some of these spots where I'm like, shit, like I shouldn't have done that, but now I'm here and now I'm pot committed. And like, what do I do? And trying not to get into those spots where, so it's really important to kind of realize when your own thinking has slowed down and when you're not actually at the top of your game. And it can be really hard to do in the moment. So I try to do it ahead of time by saying, normally I'm not at my best at the end of the day. Like I'm normally pretty tired and depleted by the time it gets to the last level of the night. So I'm just going to tighten up my game and not do anything weird, not try anything weird. And sure, like it'll be easier to play against me, but I'm just going to be I know that I'm not going to be as good at making my decisions. Even though in the moment I might be like, oh, I'm still great. But in advance, I kind of commit to knowing the moments where I usually lag a little bit.
I wish you were in my ear when I was deep in I've only played minimal tournaments for Potluck Omaha. And when I was deep in one of the tournaments and I was tired after a couple of days, I really used this, hey, why don't you fold, dummy, instead of why don't you pot under the gun with it? I feel like, maybe this is an obvious thing what you just said to tournament players out there. I don't know. I don't play a lot of tournaments, but to me that seems like something where it seems obvious, but it's something I really haven't thought much about. And I guess if you look at it from a cash game perspective, in theory, you can stop the sessions when you feel like that. And I'm not saying we always do stop those sessions. Of course we don't. But theoretically, you can just stop the session. Whereas at a tournament, you are forced to continue playing until that next day arrives if it's a multiple day tournament. So I think that's really great advice for people out there who, even if it's early in the stage, maybe you're going through a lull and you're like sitting there and you're just not focused, not in the zone, tightening up. But have you found anything that you can do throughout the session, whether it's water or make sure you're eating properly, or some people do handstands or like they take their shoes off? They get ground. I don't know. They got all sorts of tricks, the live pro tricks, and you're meeting some guys like Jay Kuhn. I know Jay Kuhn's got all sorts of tricks up his sleeve that he might do some 100-foot box jumps or something.
I can't do what he does. But I do think it's really important to actually be okay with like getting up and stepping away from the table for a little bit. So I've actually done that. Like don't think like, oh my God, I'm going to be dealt aces. Are
you sure? I get freak out. I'm sprinting to do not kill my hand. I might have the hand.
But no, that's only like in extreme situations, like where you need to take a walk. But I actually always walk on my breaks. So this is a tip that I got. So like rather than like just stand around shooting the shit on my breaks, like I'll go by myself or like just with one other person and just like walk and go outside if at all possible, to just kind of reset and actually just take it as a moment of physical exercise, as a moment of reflection, rather than just like hang around and talk poker. So I think that things like that are really important. Definitely eating well and drinking well, by which I mean a lot of water. I drink a lot of
Russian in you's coming out right now.
Yeah, I know.
That was the Russian.
Drinking well.
Wait a second. Yeah, okay. Water. I'm drinking water.
Exactly. Not vodka. I think that's really important. I actually also, whenever I'm playing, no matter how tired I am and like how late I want to sleep, I always wake up with enough time to do yoga in the mornings, because I'm going to be sitting in the chair the whole day. And that actually really helps me to actually stretch out and to kind of feel better and more with it going into the session, which I think is really important. So those are kind of, that's what I try to do, is move, get up, and actually just try to get the energy flowing. And also sometimes when I'm not doing well mentally, like when I've just been losing a lot of hands, I will sometimes do like a 10-minute meditation on a break. Like I'll just sit and just try to kind of reset myself emotionally and mentally, because sometimes that can really hurt you. Like if nothing's going well, it's really easy to just start playing badly as well. And I think one of the ways that my game has improved is in not letting that get to me, and instead to figuring out, okay, how do I reset? And sometimes I've realized that the best thing would have been for me to like just end the day early and to just leave my stack there. That I actually like, I wish I had just sat there and played till the end, because I was doing much better an hour ago. So sometimes just being willing to fold and to just kind of not get into it can be an effective strategy when nothing else is working.
probably some of the most important thing you're going to say. That's implementable, boys and girls out there listening right now. I know mainly we have a male audience, but we might have some more females out here because we got a female guest today. But that's some good advice. When you're feeling down, tired, unsure, just fold. Just hit the fold button, man. Hit the fold. Make a fold tight. Just lay down the hand. Lay it down.
For sure. The fold button's never wrong. I mean, it can be wrong, but
the thing is, though, is that you can't win if you fold, and
this is true.
And so it's like it's this $1 million question of, well, you know, folding or not fold. I mean, I don't know. Tom Dwan says you can't fold. You can't win if you fold. I mean, I don't know. You've just got in the world a year ago. Are you sort of like tuned in with who the people are? Like, do you know who Tom Dwan is? Do you know Phil? Do you know some of these like classic poker legends are?
I'm tuned in with some of them. So I do know who Tom Dwan is, and I do know who Phil Ivey is. Some of them I still don't know. So like there'll still be names when people are like, oh, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, actually, no, like that's a new name to me. But I have definitely tried to meet with as many of kind of the, you know, big name people as I can, because I think their perspectives are really interesting. And also just try to, you know, I have a Twitter list just out of poker people where like I just try to kind of keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the poker community and really try to just, you know, keep up to date and up to speed with all of that. Because to me, that's also part of it. It's not just working on my game. It's also, you know, I think for the book, it's really important to immerse myself in the culture and to figure out who the people are and how, you know, what they're doing, what they're thinking. And that's been really interesting. And some of them I've never met, but I want to learn
about. What have you learned about the poker world? What have you learned about it? What do you think about it?
It's very diverse in the sense of, you know, all sorts of people. Like we talked about the super smart people who could really do anything they want. There are also some really insanely, you know, some pretty big sickos in there where you're like, oh my God, how are you such a phenomenal poker player? And then you go and like risk it all on baccarat. I'm not naming any names, Phil Ivey. So, you know, it's one of these things like, how does that happen? Like, how can you actually have such a brilliant poker mind and yet then be able to do something like that? So there's really a ton of diversity. I've learned much more about cryptocurrency than I ever thought I would learn in my entire life. And I still don't understand it. So I'm not myself. I haven't gone completely native. I have zero investments in crypto because I don't understand how it works. And I don't like doing things I don't understand. I've realized that sports betting is a thing. I never knew that existed, and that it's actually a huge thing, and that a lot of people actually lose a lot of money on it.
You're learning some good things here. Okay, keep going.
So, you know, it's one of these things where like you learn, I learned about credit card roulette. I had no idea what credit card roulette was. I lost my first big credit card roulette, which really hurt. Good. Yep. And I mean, who does this, right? Like who came up with credit card roulette? Like that's one of the things I've learned about poker players. Like they want to like gamble on a lot of different things. Also learned about prop betting and that it can suddenly like come out of nowhere. And there are some people who just love to make prop bets all the time on just completely crazy things.
Yes, I got a couple prop bets. I have a book prop bet. I wrote a book before for a prop bet. And I think you actually might be the only author I've really ever had on here. So I usually would talk about like writing or like anything like that. But I have a book right now where I need to write a book. Some sort of book. Not an official book as before, but I need to write a book about what. Now, I'm not saying I'm the expert, Maria. When I say I'm not saying this. This is research I've gathered from others. I'm not the one coming up with it, but it's what women want men to know about sex. And now it's a little outside my normal realm of things with poker. But that's what the little book is going to be. A little short book. It's going to be a living book. It's not quite like my poker related book that I wrote, but that's the book, and that's for a prop bet. So you're right. Prop betting is very, very big.
Yeah, yes. And you're gonna find out. I'm sure you're gonna have some interesting research for that book. That'll be.
I've been researching this one all my life, Maria.
Excellent. Excellent.
I've been researching this one all my. I was made to write this. No, I'm kidding. I don't know.
So,
I can't figure it. I'm never gonna figure out what they want.
So it's so funny. Like this is just a totally new world to me. Like I didn't realize that any of this stuff existed. Like this is not the way that this is not the way I've ever gone through a day. Like I've never had a dinner where like people have actually, within the scope of 5 minutes, like all of a sudden, like there's $50,000 being bet like in total on just random stuff. And it's totally different in that way. It's very entertaining because I don't myself engage in this. And I think it's really fun to watch. And it's totally different. Like, and the funny thing is, a lot of people who've been in the poker world their whole life, like that's what they think that life is like.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you're saying these, I'm like, yeah, this is poker. Yeah,
exactly. So it's very funny. And then they see like how shocked I am, not shocked in a bad way, but like, whoa, like this is a thing. And they're like, oh my God, like you don't know what credit card roulette is? Like what planet did you grow up on? I'm like, I don't know. I've managed to go through decades of life without ever once hearing that term. And it's really cool. There's definitely its own culture. And in some ways it's more fun because I think that a lot of, for the most part, poker players have a lot more gamble in them than people in different professions. But the other thing is they really also understand risk a lot better. So a lot of people, like you can just bang your head against the wall trying to explain kind of the concept of like of calculated risk to them. And poker players just know exactly what that is, and it's much more intuitive to them. So that's really cool.
What do like relationship wise, family wise, friends, like what do they think about your pivot from?
Other than my grandmother,
what do you think about this? Yeah, what are their thoughts on this?
Other than my grandmother, who thinks that I've become a degenerate gambler and who's very disappointed in me, and who keeps asking me, when I'll go back to being a normal person. They've all been incredibly supportive, and I think it's the coolest thing in the world. Like my parents are so into this. They now like follow all the live tournament updates. And I remember at the PCA when I busted the main event in 42nd place. So I think I made it to day 4. So I had a pretty deep run. Like it was good. They were watching, like I was on the live stream. They were really into it. Then I was talking to them the next day and they're like, oh, we're so glad that Maria Lampropoulos won. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? They're like, oh, well, after you busted, like we were rooting for her. I was like, guys, the tournament is over when I bust. Like you're not gonna, that's it. No more tournament. But like they actually got into it and they're like, oh, well, we want to know who wins. Like we're going to root for the other girl who's still in it. Like it was very funny. Like they think it's the coolest thing in the world. And my friends, everyone thinks it's pretty cool, which I think is, other than my grandmother, everyone's on board. And everyone is kind of rooting for me. Even my editor is excited, even though he'd like to see some chapters of the book.
Is that what editors do? I feel like I feel like I could use an editor. Editor sounds about like someone like, hey, dummy, let's get this going. I'm like, oh, I forgot. Yeah, I need an editor for sure.
Yep, for sure. But
plus, you as a best-selling author, I mean, your book's probably gonna do well too. So they're probably like, listen, let's get this moving. Let's get this moving here.
I hope so. And I mean, I hope it does well, but you never know. There's variance, and I'll do. There is. It's like with anything. You can write all I can do is write the best book I can, and then hope that the timing is right and that the right places pick it up.
I don't know. I think that the marketing and that stuff really matters too. I mean, you can write the great book, but if you don't,
for sure. Oh no,
that part matters too a lot, right?
For sure, you have to write the best book you can. You have to do everything you can to market it well. But even still, you need to get lucky. There are some really good books that just happen to come out at the wrong time, or that something goes wrong and like it just never quite takes off. So you do have to hit that X factor too. And that's not something you can control. I think I have an advantage in that my first 2 books did well. So like at least people know who I am. That said, like that's still not a guarantee that this one's going to do well too. Although I hope it will. And like I said, I'll do everything I can. I'll control what I can control. And I'll try not to stress about the stuff that I can't control, although I'm obviously going to stress about it because you always stress when you have a book coming out.
Oh, for sure. Always. I mean, you always think about that. I feel like you're going to have the support of the poker world at some point when this book comes out, especially kind of working with different people who have influence in the world. And I think people are going to be more than happy to sort of share and get it out there. And I would imagine it's going to also teach people things too about different things about themselves, about poker, about their lives, about all sorts of different depth.
I hope so. I hope so. That's the goal. And I'd also, one of my other goals is, I do want to bring more people to poker. I think it's a fascinating game that can be so, like, if you take it seriously, if you actually learn it, and if you have self-awareness going into it, I think it can make you a much better decision maker outside of poker, and can help you in a lot of different ways, and can help you grow as a person. So I actually, I'd love it if more people came to the game. I actually think that like kids should learn how to play poker in elementary school, that it should be like a class, because it teaches you how to think about the world in a different way, which is much more correct, I think.
We're starting them young. We're building the next
exactly.
Beat these bots, Maria. I am completely on board with this movement to get kids started. I actually thought about doing a thing where I'd start an academy for Potman Omaha players, because we want to really start young, but more of a joke than anything. But so you think that they should teach kids poker?
Yeah.
They don't teach them anything that matters a lot of times in school. Not from my understanding of school. They teach you things that you don't ever really use. So
exactly. And I think poker is so useful in helping you think about the world, think about risk, think about decision making, think about emotional management, thinking about how to negotiate with people, how to read situations, how to gain an edge in certain spots. Like, I think poker is actually one of the best real life skills that you can have. Especially when you're still young, when you still kind of are starting out and haven't had that much experience with people or with these sorts of dynamics. Poker is a way that you could really learn, okay, this is how I negotiate. Like, this is how I play my cards, even when I don't have the best hand. And now think of that metaphorically, like how many times does that happen in life? And most of the time, you really don't have any way of evaluating it. You don't know how to approach risk. I mean, our brains suck at probabilities. We're really bad at them. Poker teaches you how to think that way. So actually, I am very pro, kindergarten, first grade. Let's get going.
Sounds like an experiment right here. I don't think you're a scientist, but if you're a scientist, it sounds like a good experiment. You get a couple kids.
Let's get someone to do it.
Johnny Harley said, yes, she is bringing the best out in Joey. This is a really surprising meeting of minds. She has lifted his thoughts above pool parties. Now, listen, guys, these are kind of things I think about all the time, but you oftentimes, you can't have these type of conversations with a lot. Sometimes, like people enunciate things differently, and then you focus more on getting out of line and fun thing. It's like but these are the kind of things I think about all the time when I'm like watching videos. I'm always watching videos about like different sort of psychological things, and I like to read a lot of books related to things like that. So these are all things I've always thought about related to poker for past 10 plus years. And it's always cool to be able to talk about these sorts of things. And someone said there's a lot of strategy earlier in this one, and that's true. There is a lot of strategy in this one. But I think that when it comes to strategy in poker, we haven't really talked about what to do with the hand specifically, or ace, king, aces. But I think there is so much other strategy that goes into poker that we could talk strategy for hours and never get into a specific hand. But we can improve our thought process and our sort of the way we go upon playing. We can improve that so much that when we go play the next time, it's like, wow, I'm seeing or thinking about things differently.
For sure.
So, and that's sort of why I always thought about poker. It's like there's the actual playing poker, but there's all these other things that go into it on the mental side of things that you can't really group together as one thing. But I think they all matter just as much as everything else when it comes to becoming a consistent winning player.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's very well phrased.
People say kids should start out gamble with 8 years old. They do actually. It's called arcades. So Circus, that's here on the Strip. I went to Circus. They got this like crazy arcade. I love arcades. Oh my God, I like playing games. And I had a realization that this is basically a casino for kids. You put in these monies, you win these prizes, you play these games, they give you prizes. It's a casino, except you don't win money, you win prizes. It's the same exact thing. It's like they're priming minds. Shout out to Peter Holes. They're priming minds to become gamblers. Have you ever thought about something like that? I had this. I was walking around. I'm like, this is like a casino for children.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the wrong side of it. I think you need the poker side to actually teach the skill side and to show that it's not all about the gamble. But it's so funny that you have things like that. You're absolutely right. And yet, like everyone would be, not everyone, I think people listening to this probably think it's not a bad idea, but a lot of people would be totally shocked. They'd be like, oh my God, you want to teach kids poker? Like, are you insane? Like, what kind of a horrible human being are you? Like, actually, no, like they're learning really bad gambling habits elsewhere. Why don't we actually teach them how to manage this and how to play, how to maximize your skill, how to push your edge, how to work on yourself and your own game, and how to understand kind of that gambling element in it so that you understand variance and understand how it works. And you can kind of work around it. So I think that it can be a very good countermeasure to the types of things that kids are exposed to every single day.
If I had a kid, I'd start teaching them poker right now, but I don't actually have a kid, so
Neither
I
do
will
I.
not.
I tried teaching my nieces and nephews.
And what happened? How'd that go?
So far, so good. I have one nephew who is going to be Tom Dwan, who raises any two. And
let's get him on the podcast, man. Let's talk to this kid. What the heck? I'm trying to meet the next Tom Dwan. How old is our guy? What's his story? What's his deal?
Our guy is 5 years old.
Oh my God, he actually, okay, he's really young. All right. Damn. I mean, listen, we can get him an online account and a couple sites. I mean, they don't care. Some of these sites, they don't, we can get him on Global Poker or something like that. I don't think you gotta, can we get him as he actually, so he plays, like he's
played live with me. Like we've no online poker. We've learned the rules of the game. And the one thing he's internalized is that for me, raising is always an option. And sometimes when I'll play with him and I'll be like, you can fold. He's like, no, I want to raise. I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, yep, I'm raising. I'm like, okay. And you know what? He gets a lot of folds. I'm a bitch.
I'm not folding this kid either.
Yeah, I'm totally not folding to him.
I don't know what happened. That's like you got me and him are gonna go through a battle and then you're just sitting waiting to pick us off. I mean, that's a scary situation. I'm like, this is like Isildur 1. You're right. This is how Isildur 1 got to start, guys.
I know, seriously. It's so funny. But I'm the bitch who's like, I'm not folding to you, kid. I don't care if you end up losing this one. I'm going to show you what losing feels like.
So you let the ego get in the battle. So when it comes to battling with the 5-year-old, you get the ego get in there. But when it comes to battling with Adrian Mateos, then you decide to take that's probably, I imagine that's probably a good strat to take because the 5-year-old's fundamentals are slightly lacking for now. I don't know. This kid could be a beast one day.
I know, seriously. I think he'll be beating me in a few years.
I'm not sure about that, but that would be someone. We got a comment. What's the comment here? Green Thumb Syndrome incoming Upswing course for juniors and tots, $99.99 monthly. It's not a bad idea. I mean, I don't know. Someone proposed a nickname for you earlier, Maria. I don't know if I like it. I gotta really get in the lab and think about this more. But Maria Konnikova. I don't know. Just a thought, a play on your favorite word, which is the word bluff. And yeah, I'm going to brainstorm more. Do you have any nicknames? Does anyone call you anything like that?
No, but I think I need a nickname. So let's come up with something a little better. That one's not rolling off the tongue.
Maria Konnikova. I mean, it's like a third nickname. It's not the first. It's not like not Maria Konnikova, aka like Agro Maria, aka like I'm never folding to this woman in my entire life. There ain't no goddamn chance you got to put a gun in my head. I ain't gonna fold her, aka Maria Konnikova, like something like that.
Yeah. I feel like, no, people call me MK, but that's not a nickname. Those are just my initials.
MK. I think I'm Mary Kate Olsen when I see her MK or something. I don't know why I am Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. I'm old though, man. I don't know. We said how old are you? I think I saw on Wikipedia. I know say no as a woman. Calm down, guys. For fuck's sakes, don't get too crazy on me. You have a very developed Wikipedia page. It says you're 33 on Wikipedia.
Yep.
I am 32. How does it feel to be 33 years old? I'm going to be there soon. And is it any different than 32?
My bones are aching. You start getting old, can't sleep well, insomnia. Yeah, all sorts of things happen the day of your birthday.
Shit.
Yeah, I know. Well, brace yourself.
I'm spending 8 hours a day on my foam roller to make sure my body does not let me down once I get to that point. And, we might need a little competition for a name. Let me see some names. Hold on. We got some Maria Bluffria. What? Snuffa Bluffala. Stop it. Mortal Kombat? I actually kind of like that one. Mortal Kombat. Maria Konnikova. I don't hate that one. Maria.
All right.
Okay. Mortal Kombat for my guy, Wayne. Shout out to Wayne. Okay. I can't even pronounce some of these. Mary Kona, Illuminati, MK Ultra. Oh my God, I kind of like. I'm very big into MK Ultra research right now, so I kind of like the MK Ultra. I like Mortal Kombat Maria, because the thing is, you come for that Mortal Kombat when you play. So I think like having a nickname like that sort of shows this sort of like you can't fuck with me. I'm Mortal Kombat. I'm here to fight out my life. I got my moves. I got my maneuvers. Like they got the Iceman. What's the guy's name? Someone please tell me. Scorpion guy. Jax and I don't know the people. You play Mortal Kombat ever? You ever a gamer, a video gamer?
No, the only time I ever played was it's funny. My editor at the New Yorker, like 3 years ago, assigned a piece to me. I'm still not sure why, but it was a lot of fun on first-person shooters. And so to research the piece, I played some first-person shooters, including like some of the originals. Like what was it called? Like Doom, I think, right?
What?
Like
they wanted me to write a paper in the New Yorker. I went back to 1945.
Exactly.
The first person shooter ever.
So actually, I played a bunch of them, and I actually think I did play Mortal Kombat once, but it was, like I said, it was like over 3 years ago. So I just did it for the piece, and they were really much more fun than I thought they were going to be. I was a little like, first person shooters. Then I was like, you know what? I actually get this. This is really interesting. And you get into this really interesting, I wrote all about like being in a flow state and like how it can actually.
That's true.
It was really cool.
100%. I was recently thinking about, did you leave out, you became one of the best video game players in the world in this too? Or was that, did you?
No.
Oh, I didn't know if that was in there. I didn't see the Deadspin article or the Kotaku article that they wrote about that. But I agree that, but the getting in video games for me has always been about getting in the flow state. And that's what always made online poker for me sort of what it was, is because I could so easily tap into that flow state and sort of playing basketball. I noticed that was another thing I could get into that as well. But video games, I think that's something I never thought about when I was a kid, was that you just get consumed. The time goes by. You're just like so honed in. You're so locked in. Yeah. And I mean, do you find that you actively get into the flow state when you play poker, when you write? I know for writing, for me, like hour 2 when I'm writing, all of a sudden some crazy shit deep in my mind all these like deep subconscious thoughts that I've never thought about in years start coming out and they start coming down to paper. So.
Oh, for sure. With writing, that definitely happens. Like when I'm really working on something, I will sometimes like forget to eat and realize that it's like 5 hours later and that I'm really, really hungry. But it just doesn't, like, I just go through and I'm just kind of in the zone. And I actually write a lot on paper because I don't want the distraction of kind of having the computer and all of these different things. So I'm one of the, I think, few writers who actually still fills up notebooks. But for me, especially if I'm having trouble kind of getting into that state, that's a really good way of doing it because it forces you to concentrate and it kind of just forces you to write and your mind starts working. And I really like what you said about kind of a few hours into it, like suddenly you have all these thoughts coming because that's exactly what happens. Like it takes a while to unlock that. And I have actually a few times, like it does happen to me in poker too, where I won't realize how long I've been playing. Like if you're really in the zone, like if you're really with it and like you're really tuned in, you definitely have those days that are awesome where you're where you realize like it's 6 hours later. Wow, like where did the time go? And then obviously there are the days where like you're like, oh my God, how many levels do we have left? Like, just get me out of here. And you never play as well then. I think the flow state is very important.
Yeah, I think that I've been researching a lot lately just about kind of eliminating those distractions to be able to get into it too. And I mean, obviously right now, I feel like for me, my iPhone is some sort of poison where they put some sort of like, they put something in there where you just like fiending for it, or so, I don't know. It's like you're shaking and it's just, I mean, Twitter and all these sort of notifications, like they're just constantly on your mind where it's really hard to ever sort of focus on something without having that distant thought in your mind that, I could be this, or I could be that, or it's such a habit ingrained in me. And now for you, when you're writing or when you're playing, how do you think about turning off the distractions and turning off those temptations or those ideas of things on your mind that you would like to learn more about or like to read or you would greatly enjoy reading, but you just know it's not probably good for you, probably not GTO for you to do?
Yeah, it's really important to realize that you have that tendency. So one of the things that I actually did early on when I was working on my first book was, so the book really has as its theme this idea of mindfulness and paying attention. And I talk about how Sherlock Holmes really was able to kind of be in the present moment, both see and observe and kind of just be concentrated on what's going on. And obviously with iPhones, with like 50 tabs open, like it's really hard to do that. And it takes a lot of willpower, and it's sometimes it's just too much. And so for me, it was really important to realize. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just reading this nickname. It's Bluffy the Reg Slayer. I don't know. It's amazing. I don't know. Like, Jesus Christ. That's nickname of all time. Sorry, go ahead.
That's kind of great. I mean, I love Buffy, so we could do it. We can do it. And so I decided as research to download the software called Freedom, which blocks the internet for you for any amount of time from, I think minimum is 10 hours and like you can block it up to, I don't remember. I mean, minimum is 10 minutes. And then I think you can do it like up to 10 hours or whatever. I don't remember because I haven't used it for a long time. But the only way around it is to restart your computer, which is kind of a little bit too much of a hassle normally. And so I downloaded this thing and I was like, I don't actually need it, but I'm just going to, for research purposes, try it out. And so it's a free program for the first week, like you get this trial and then you have to pay for it. And so I download the trial. I'm like, I'm never going to need this thing. And then within like 10 minutes of using it, I'm like, holy shit, like I need this thing, because I never realized how often, like when I'm stuck for a word, when I'm like in my Word document writing and I suddenly am not quite sure what I'm going to do next, my instinct, like my fingers actually go to, that key combination that switches windows to go online, to check my email, to see this. And when I realized how often I did that, I was like, holy shit, like I am so easily distracted. And so then I ended up paying for the program and using it to help me finish writing the book. And it was insanely helpful because to me, it was really important to realize that I actually lack the self-control to avoid a lot of this stuff. So I need to like put my phone in the other room and block the internet, and then I can write. And it kind of, I was like, oh, damn, I thought I was better than that. But you know what? I've owned it. I admit that it's hard for me. And sometimes you just have to tie your hands so that you can work hard.
But what about when you study poker? Do you, because obviously internet's on.
Yeah, so now I obviously need the internet for something like that. So I actually, with videos, it's easy. I just full screen them, and I kind of commit to not getting out of the full screen. So I'll be taking notes, like I'll be taking notes with pen and paper as I watch them. So like I actually have like notes from Upswing and from Run It Once, and I have a notebook where I take these notes. And that's the way that I manage that. And I try to watch the whole video at once. So like if it's something that's multi-part, I'll be like, okay, this is 40 minutes. I'm just going to watch these 40 minutes. It's probably going to take me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to watch 40 minutes because I'm pausing it and kind of thinking through the stuff. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to check my email. Then I'm going to kind of see what else is going on. So I try to do it that way. And then for things like, I never buy internet when I'm on a plane. That's actually a really good moment for me to just not have that access and to just be able to focus on whatever I'm doing. So I try to employ little tricks like that because I need the tricks, because it's really hard for me otherwise if I'm not committed to doing something. Like you want to see, you're like, ooh, like I've got 11 new like messages on Twitter. Like I've got, a notification from this or that. Ooh, let's see who's liking my photos on Instagram. And I also have all alerts off. So like my phone receives 0 alerts. So I don't get any alerts for Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And I don't have the Facebook app on my phone. Like I do things like that so that I'm not tempted to do stupid stuff.
Yeah, I had to uninstall Twitter and Instagram from my phone. I feel like while it's good for me, what I do, and like it's good for business or it's good to keep learning, because at some point I'll probably work behind the scenes with people on social media, like building content and building like brands and that sort of strategy stuff. But it's so easy to go on your timeline or on Twitter and just like go down a rabbit hole, or it's so easy to go on Instagram and go on pictures, or it's just like, it's just super easy to be able to do that. So
rabbit holes definitely happen.
Yeah. Let's get a couple of questions from the chat, guys, and then we'll wrap things up here. I mean, I could probably go for a while, but I try to normally when I have newer people on, I mean, I guess 2 hours isn't that short now I think about it, but I always think, well, if it's a person that people don't recognize, but shorter, they might give it a chance. And then once I hit a certain point where I go too long, I'm like, fuck, I'm just going to keep going. So that's kind of how I always think about it. Sasha, you got a question? Come here, ask the question. Sasha's going to come ask a question right now. Poker Sasha, shout out to Sasha, the PLO beast, aka the Wisdomatic PLO girl, aka you guys are both still living in Russia somehow. So maybe, I don't know. Go ahead. What's the
Sasha.
question, Sasha?
Hi, Maria. Nice to meet you.
Whoa,
Nice to meet you.
I actually, when I saw you winning the PCA, when I saw you winning the PCA tournament, I already told Joey that we need to get her on the podcast, especially when I read that Eric Seidel coached you poker, and it immediately reminded me of Barry, because Barry is also my mentor. And I texted Barry, who was in PCA. I was like, "Oh, have you met this girl Maria? She her story and with Eric remind me so much of you." And then we were talking a lot about you and so on, and it's really interesting to hear how Eric coaches you, because they're friends. He and Eric are friends, but they have such different approaches.
Sure.
As you know, Barry's a cash game player. Yeah, Barry Greenstein. Barry's a cash game player, and I love tournaments too. Like I play a lot more tournaments last year until I met Barry, and Barry is a cash game player. He's very keen on playing cash games, and also this man Joey is also a cash game player. So I'm surrounded by cash game players who kept telling me you should play more cash. So I've since then play a lot less tournaments and play a lot more.
Tell me you're inspired to play tournaments now.
I know, I'm so inspired. I want to play tournaments. but no, yeah, these people around me have been telling me to not play tournaments as much and play more cash games. But it's just really interesting to hear your stories and how Eric has coached you on poker and so on. So I was really happy to have you on the podcast. I was really excited to hear your stories. I think that you, Eric, and me and Barry, we should have a talk, or maybe we'll do some have a lunch or something and talk about some poker and so yeah, during the series. Yeah, because very interesting. Oh yeah, so Maria. Sorry, so Maria. So you, I was very excited. I was very excited to meet you, and especially I know you're from Russia too. I need to practice my Russian, so I'm excited to meet you in person as well. So my question is, you came from a psychologist background. I don't know if you covered that, but what's your take on handling downswings? Do you have any suggestions to the poker players out there when you're facing a downswing? What's your approach, and how would you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about some of the strategies I use, not necessarily in this particular context, but I think learning to train yourself to be process rather than outcome oriented goes a long way. So just don't focus on how you did and how you ran, focus on how you played. So, and try to get kind of the most you can out of that. So just think about, is my thought process correct? Am I thinking about these spots the right way? Or am I letting my emotion get to me, because that will actually make me a worse player? And so I think thinking about it that way is really important. And the other thing, and this is something I learned from Eric, so it's not something from the psychology background, but learning not to play above your bankroll so that you can handle downswings. I think a lot of players, they'll win a big tournament and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I just won $200,000. I can start playing 25Ks. Well, no, that's actually not that many 25Ks. And if you start losing them, that's really, really bad. Or even 10Ks, that's still a little too high. So I will play, I'll play 10Ks occasionally, but I've only played a handful, and I know that that's above what I should be playing. So I'll play it for the experience. I'll play it kind of to do and be ready to lose it and not have it kind of affect me when I do lose it, because I know exactly why I'm doing it. And I know that that's not the level I should be playing at. I know that my level is actually much lower than that. So as long as you don't kind of get in over your head financially, then I think that approach of just making sure that you always look at the process and think about, how am I playing? Am I approaching these spots correctly? Because everyone, there's variance, and you're going to lose sometimes for a long time, even if you're playing well. But as long as you're playing well, that's okay. the moment you're not playing well, that's not okay. Then you have to work on it and figure out, okay, what's happening? Why am I not playing well? Is it because I'm too emotionally involved? In which case, like, let me work on that. Is it because like I'm too negative and so it's making me too cautious? Okay, like, let me work on that. Am I becoming too aggressive because I'm trying to chase my losses? Like, try to figure out what is actually breaking down in your thought process, and then try to approach that. And I think that really is a mental trick as opposed to any sort of strategic trick.
Right. So kind of sort of just focus on going into the session, not having the expectation to win. I think
Yeah.
I read this somewhere online the other day too. So going to the session not expecting to win, but focus on what you're going to learn from the session. So focus on
Exactly. And on how you're going to play. Going into the session saying, you know what, I'm going to go into this playing my best poker and playing my best game. And I can't control whether I win or lose, but I can control how I react and I can control how I play. So let me focus on the things I can control and let me try not to let the things I can't control get to me.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great advice for all the poker players out there. It's still it's very interesting to hear your Eric's approach versus Barry's approach. Right, because if I talk to Barry about this, and Barry's first response would be, "Don't play tournaments." So yes, we do need to get together probably during the World Series. I know, like Joey is really also very opposed to playing tournaments, and Barry as well. So yeah, we need to get together and have a meetup.
Sounds good.
More bias.
Yeah, you
All
are.
right.
But yeah, nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too, Sasha. Take care.
Summer.
Good question, Sasha. Nice work, kid. Sasha crushing it as always. I'm sure you guys know Sasha from Sundays with Sasha, the PLO Beast, aka PLO Monster, aka Mrs. PLO. All right, let's take a couple more questions, guys. We're gonna wrap it up here. What do you got planned coming up here, Maria? What do you got planned over this next month here? We got 300K coming up. We got the satellites at 300K. I wouldn't be surprised if we go see you play that and win. What do you got in store, kid? What do you got in the docket here? What do you got?
So, I mean, the next big thing is the World Series, and I'm going to spend the next month preparing for it. And I don't know yet if I'm going to play any live poker in between now and then, but I know that I'm going to, like, I have a study schedule for kind of what I want to work on, what I want to accomplish, both strategically and mentally going into it, so that I start off playing my best game. And I think one of the things that is really important is that I'm well rested and that I'm ready to play. And so I don't want to burn out beforehand. So it's not like I'm going to go to Vegas now and start playing a bunch of tournaments before the World Series. So it's a trade-off, because it's obviously good to keep playing and not to get rusty. But I think as long as I'm studying and working and going through hands and kind of thinking through stuff, then it's going to be okay. So there's definitely a chance that the World Series is my next live event.
Are you planning to get a poker house out here with a group of people, group of other players, or what do you plan to do?
So actually, I got an Airbnb, which is just an apartment for me, because I'm an introvert at the end of the day. Like, it's very good for me to go home and just unwind and not have to talk to anyone. So it won't be a poker house. It'll be a poker apartment very close to the Rio, because, like I said, I don't know how to drive, so I'm going to be Ubering everywhere. So I don't want insane Uber bills.
Something tells me you could learn how to drive if you put your mind. I feel like if I gave you a car, you'd like figure it out. You'd be like, okay, well, let me throw this around. I don't know. I feel like maybe you couldn't legally do it though. You don't want to break TOS around here. We're not terms of service breakers around here. So let me see what we got. Hold on a second. A question. No, not that one. Alexander says, I lost parts of the podcast, but did she touch on burnout, breaks, and the likes?
Yeah, I think we talked about taking breaks and making sure you don't overdo it. And it's something that I was talking about just now when I said I'm not sure if I'm actually going to play anything before the World Series, because I've been playing a really, really full schedule. Like, I'm from New York. I live in New York, but I've spent like 2 weeks in New York over the last 3 months. It's been pretty crazy. I've been all over the map, and I think it's going to be really good for me to just actually spend a few weeks here and recharge, because some people, you don't realize when you're burning out in the process, right? You're just kind of playing, and you think you're just fine. But I think it is really important to step away and to let your brain reboot and process everything it's learned. So that's what I'm going to be doing for a few weeks, just processing.
Wouldn't be the Poker Life podcast unless I ask this question. A lot of guys in the chat are asking, is this girl single, Maria? The guys want to know. I told you we got a primarily male-dominated audience here. They asking us in the question, is she single?
No, this girl's married.
Sorry, listen, boys. Wifed up. We do not. No married girl. No married grinders around here, guys. Listen, stay away. A woman tells you they're married. A man tells you he's married. Stay away. You seductress people out there. I know how these people. I know how my audience think these guys are out of line, Maria. Okay, they're like in love with you now. So I'm telling them they ain't gonna leave you alone. They're crazy, but especially if they find out you got Instagram, they're gonna be sending all sorts of messages here. Mark Rubin says, "Hey Joey, can you ask her if she read any books outside of poker that helped her with poker?"
Yeah, for sure. I think that a lot of the books that are kind of in the psychology world that I read before coming to poker are incredibly helpful. So if you read, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, if you read Walter Michel's The Marshmallow Test, which is all about self-control, those types of things are incredibly important. Nassim Taleb has some really good stuff. Just things that teach you about thinking and about your thought process that really have nothing to do with poker as such, but really help you figure out, this is how I think about risk. This is how my brain works under pressure. This is what happens when I'm emotional. I think that those types of books are really important.
Very great stuff here, guys. Very great stuff out there. If you guys have any, if people have questions or follow-ups, do you encourage people to send you a message and maybe ask you something if they are curious about
they can
some sort of topic
Twitter,
or something like that?
Yeah, Twitter is definitely the best way. I have open DMs, so anyone can send me a direct message.
Slide in with the questions, guys.
Yeah, but you guys can also just send me not even a DM, just tweet at me, and I will tweet back. And if it's if it's something that a lot of people are curious about, then I'll kind of tweet it to all of my followers, because I think that a lot of questions that come up, a lot of people end up having them.
100% agree. 100% agree. Someone said, is she playing Jenga with the books behind her?
Yeah, seriously, that's kind of what it looks like.
What is that? What is up with this stack? Massive stack? Is that GTO? That's optimal?
It's actually a bookcase with invisible shelves, like the way that the books go on them. You can't tell.
It.
Yeah.
No way. That isn't invisible. Wait, what are you doing?
I mean, they're not actually invisible, but when you stack books on them, it looks like there are no shelves. It's just like these really thin, like slabs.
Oh.
Yeah.
Seems out of line right there. I don't know, man. I'm trying to. It gives you the disheveled writer look going on. You have like a book stacked to the ceiling up there. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a little. Yeah, very New York. Someone said it's very New York. It is very New York. You got the exposed brick, the stack of books, and the weird lamp. That's what they said.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, it's kind of New York. I mean, I feel like I got a weird lamp here, and I got no exposed brick in my place in Vegas here, but it's very New York City. I definitely agree with that. So, all right, guys in chat. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like the podcast and you want Maria to win the World Series of Poker main event, hit the like button. If you don't want her to win the main event, if you don't care how she does in the main event, if you say I don't care, then don't hit the like button. Don't hit it. That's what I got to say. But yeah, if you want to follow Maria, I think you just laugh. I think you make me feel funnier than I actually am. I think I'm funny to a small degree, but after talking with you, I feel like I might be the funniest person of all time, and certainly I might be. So I think that you probably is that just kind of personality you are? I think that's probably just kind of person you are. Seem to be very a happy sort of like getting after life, energetic person who usually has a smile on their face.
I'd like to think so. I mean, my attitude is like, we've got one life, we might as well smile and enjoy it and have a good time. And this was a lot of fun, so I actually did enjoy it. So it's a genuine smile the whole way.
Did you not think you would enjoy it? Did you think were you worried? You're like, oh, this crazy guy? Like what?
I had no expectations. I was excited to do it. I've heard a lot about you. I've seen some of your podcasts, so I thought it was really fun. Like I was excited.
What have you
to
heard?
come on. Good things, all good things.
Anything out of line? I'm pretty out of line. I gotta be honest. I'm a little crazy for sure. So what? You've only heard good things though, you're right? Sure.
Only good things. This was a lot of fun.
That's too bad. Kashu says, my best friend is the friend who laughs at almost everything I say, and I love him for it. Yeah, me too. All right, guys, if you want to follow Maria on Twitter, I will put a link in the description below, or you can follow her at a name I'm not going to be able to spell right now, at M. Konnikova in the description, at M. Konnikova.
Yeah.
KONNIKOVAKONNIKOV. It's like a, I don't know
All
what I'm
good.
trying to remember the spelling for that one. It's gonna be a tough one. But yeah, follow there. Your Instagram too. What's your Instagram? What do you got?
I'm at girl named Maria, except there's no I in girl because I was late to Instagram and someone already had girl named Maria with the I. So it's just GRL named Maria. So I had to misspell it. Yeah.
How long did it take you to come up with this one? Were you in the lat? Were you just like, let me girl named Maria, but I'm gonna leave the I out of the girl?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
I mean, I'm with it, man. I don't know. Mine's Poppy GTO, so it's not. I just took the two words I say a lot, Poppy and GTO. So I mean, it's kind of easy for me. I think that's a tough one. Girl named Maria, but leave the I out. I mean, it's kind of easy to figure out, so it's not too hard. But yeah, guys, check her out. No creepy stuff, guys. I know how you weird people are out there with Sash, so be respectful, okay? That's all I gotta ask. But yeah, that's it. Much love, everybody. If you want to check out back, you can replay the podcast on YouTube. You can go check out iTunes, search Poker Life Podcast on iTunes. And I'll be back Thursday with my man Phil Galfond, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow, part 2 of that live stream, 2K, 4K, 8K, the great game Potland Omaha. They're playing Luce Leon, Aussie Matt, and Sam Triggett. Yeah, that'll be on tomorrow. We'll do a live stream of that afternoon. And that's it. Much love, Maria. Thank you guys in the chat. Thank you, my boy Jack Fleming. Much love to all everybody out there. And that's it. Peace out. Adios.